YouTube and Facebook.
Did you say Periscope?
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, audio's playing. I think we're good here. So I'm just going to start powering things up. Brograph is up. Let's see. Notify the bat signal on Slack. There we go. Slack knows. People coming in: Chris H, Grant, Gav Grant, Liam. Taking us live here. See our faces. All right, here we are.
Awesome.
All right, so I think we're good to go. We've got all the notes and all that stuff. So, who else we got coming in here? Jason, Rockelforce. Swabroop.
Rockelforce might be one of my favorite Twitter handles.
Rockelforce.
Great name.
Yeah, Matt's changing his look. Yeah, Matt is unfortunately at his grandfather's funeral today, so he'll not be on. Kent, what's up, Kent?
Yeah, I went for the interrogation look in case anybody wants to send some really tough questions.
Ri-Fi, what's up, Ri-Fi?
Oh man, that's a great name too.
Tesla Rock. All right, I think we got enough people in here. We can get going. Let's get our recorder working.
Sweet.
I'm rolling on my end.
All right.
And good rule of thumb on that is just keep that up while we're recording, just so you see kind of the waveform recording. And if for any reason it stops, just let me know and we'll just pause and address it. So
sounds good.
All right, so we're gonna do a sync, and I'll just say 1, 2, 3, and then we'll clap.
Sounds good. All right. Do you want me to hit record now?
Yes.
Okay. We are recording.
All right. All right, let's do this.
Last drink.
Yeah. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Cool.
Doesn't sound together now, but it will when I edit.
Awesome.
So, okay, my notes. Make sure I know how to do this when I don't have Matt to bounce off of.
I know, it's got to be weird, right?
Yeah. It's been a long time since he hasn't been on a show, so. All right, everything is good. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. People are coming in, so we'll get started.
I'm super jealous of your backdrop. I feel like this could be a meme. Like if I was on this side, basic and extra, one on each side.
Dude, this thing is awesome. $150.
And you have the that's amazing.
El Gato, man, they make all sorts of stuff for streaming people. So great.
Yeah.
Phil says, "Did Matt do a Chris Schmidt?"
Oh,
I don't feel so
can I say
good.
too soon? That's too soon.
Too soon. Oh, all right. Yo, we will talk about that on the show today, though.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. What up, bros, and welcome to another Brograph Brocast. I'm Dave, and joining us today is Ryan Summers from Digital Kitchen.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
And Brograph is a supplement to our site, brograph.com, which is a motion graphics tutorial site with tutorials, plugins, podcasts, and other mograph stuff. And on the show, we talk about everything ranging from motion graphics to Cinema 4D, After Effects plugins, render engines, doing business, doing taxes, being a contractor, or working for the man. And you can email us, brograph@brograph.com. Let us know what you think about the show. Send us your comments, queries, concerns, and grievances. Any show topic, if it's noob or if it's advanced, we love to talk about it. Send them our way, brograph@brograph.com. And as you may notice, Matt is not here this week, so kind of threw me off a bit on my intro. But I'm doing all right. He'll be back next week. And Ryan, I'm super excited to have you on the show. You've been on one of the group shows that we did in Chicago last year. You've been on the Monday meeting with Liam and Mark, and I'm super excited to have you here because we've got some great topics to go over today. And you know what? It's not a big deal that Matt's not here because you're the type of person where I can just give you a topic and just kind of sit back and let you go. So
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I feel like I've been working my way up the ladder from a surprise guest appearance to the Monday morning, now the big show.
So hopefully we don't have any issues with Skype or anything. If we do, we'll work it out. We had some Skype problems before, but we've had a really bad streak of bad luck. If you probably noticed, the audio last week was just a mix from the YouTube channel because we had problems with the audio master files. So I'm crossing my fingers that everything's going to record right this week. We'll be good.
Pray to the Microsoft gods.
Yeah. So I've done that. I've redone all my stuff. I do have to say I had to give a salute to my Mac Pro this week because it has been hanging on, just doing one thing, and that was just encoding the show to the YouTube stream after the fact, just because I never moved all the presets over. But that Mac Pro has been sitting there on my bench for 10 years, and I gave it a salute as I shut down for the last time. For now, I'm sure I'll boot it up again at some point, but it's been decommissioned for now. So
yeah, there's probably a lot of other people out there in the same situation, right? Like everybody's been holding on, and everybody's making this slow slide over to the dark side.
Yeah. So I've been on PC for a while, but it was just kind of out there, and I was like, man, this thing was a beast. You know, it lasted me. I bought it in 2009. And what else do I have here from the week wrap up? We've got, somebody in the chat, ZVerDDEJ, I don't know how to pronounce that, says, when are we opening up Slack? We'll open the Slack back up at the beginning of March for about 7 days. And other notes I had, Spider-Man got Best Animated yesterday. That was cool.
Amazing. Yeah, well deserved.
Very well deserved. LA Motion Plus Design. I had a lot of FOMO. I was watching all of the awesome pictures coming in on Facebook from everybody. Grant was there, said to check out Min Chi from Elastic, who worked on the, the Doom Patrol titles.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have to hopefully check that out. I don't know if they're going to be putting any of that online to watch. I hope they do, because I saw Jules and Andrew Kramer and Beeple and David Ariev and everybody, Bart and Damer, all having a good time. But the big topic from this week, I guess, would be Chris Schmidt leaving Grayscale Gorilla. And it's like, wow, that's unexpected.
I think
really seen anything.
We saw the whole industry kind of just shoulder shrug, kind of like, what's going on? They came out of nowhere. I mean, I feel like it's a huge deal. I mean, it's as big as of a deal as them signing up Chad Ashley, right? Like that felt like a huge level up in terms of, you know, the type of people Grayscale Gorilla was addressing. But I mean, Chris has been there from the beginning, you know, I mean, from the early kind of like sit down for an hour and do as many tips as you can to going from like fairly small kind of scripts and plugins to him and his. I think the biggest thing that I'm frustrated about is that people aren't talking about the fact that it's Chris and his brothers. You know, it's the whole Schmidt clan, right? Like I'm sure that they have a whole set of like kind of other people working on programming and other stuff. But in my mind, and I'm sure a lot of other people's, Chris was kind of like the heart and soul of the ingenuity and the kind of Nick going from his just curiosity to the industry and tools and techniques to all of a sudden being like a full blown real company. So I'm sure there's plans, and I'm sure Chris has something amazing coming up too. That he's a really important part to how people work in Cinema 4D.
Yeah.
Whether or not people really realize it or not, like the kind of, I feel like every program or every software has like their kind of like one or two people that changed how we work in it. And if you look at like Lloyd Alvarez for scripts and all the the people that work on scripts for AE, it's kind of amazing to think that there was a time where there was barely anyone making scripts or plugins or even really talking about workflow. There was Tim Clapham. There are a couple other people that probably don't really do that much anymore in terms of like tutorials and new techniques and new tools. But Chris is like one of the first one before the explosion in C4D and Maxon. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where he goes. I mean, I'm sure they're not going to stop programming.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it was 9 years. They said 9 years is a really long time to stay at one place and to see it go from, if you think of like the startup world, like that's a long time outside of like 3D, but just in like business to go from, some friends working together to, having one of the most dominant kind of companies servicing the industry. So it makes sense that it would be, it's the next step for them. But I'll be excited. I applaud them for all the work they've done up until now, and I'm really excited to see what they do, because it's always it's almost like Cineversity, like all the stuff we get from Cineversity and all the kind of Maxon USA tools. I'm really excited to see kind of what's next.
And Grant said in the chat that Chris just replied to his tweet saying he ain't done teaching yet.
Oh,
and,
no.
His brothers, you don't really hear much about his brothers because they're not on camera, but they all work so well together, and we can't wait to see what's in store. I did talk to Chris on the phone and wish him the best, and can't wait to see him at NAB. It's going to be great, hanging out with everybody and drinking lots of whiskey, of course, as we do. Are you going to NAB this year?
We'll see. I've been for traveling for Digital Kitchen quite a bit last year and this year. I'm actually in Orlando right now. I'm on the back end of like a LA, Vegas, Orlando kind of work trip. So if the schedule works out, definitely. I think I've gone for like the last 8 or 9 years in a row. Some years didn't plan on going, and then at the last second, like last year, I wasn't going to go. And a buddy of mine was doing, I think like 5 or 6 different talks at Post-Production World. And at the last second had a death in the family, couldn't go. So I got drafted in like the week before to kind of help do some of his talks. So we'll see. I have plans to go if I can, but we'll see how the schedule works out. It's hard not to miss it, especially, man, after last year with the Sunday night kind of
the motion,
whatever you want to call it, the mashup of all the studios kind of putting a show together, that you could almost get away going just like Sunday night and then spend one day on Monday, and you'd be good. Everything got consolidated into those two nights now.
Except you don't want to miss that Tuesday night Maxon pinball party, though.
That's true. That's a tough one. It's a good 3-day event.
Yeah, but the tickets for that Sunday meetup are now on sale. They're free, but you still have to sign up and register. I think there's only about 350 spots, and I think they said free drinks, and there's going to be food available. That's going to be awesome. That's like the night. That's when everybody flies in for the most part. Matt and I will be there a little bit early, getting ready to go, but most of the people fly in because they're going to go to the show starting Monday morning, so everybody's raring to meet up, and that's really how it started. It started as a few people hanging out because everybody was just showing up for the show, and it just got bigger and bigger. And 2 years ago, it was the Grayscale guys and School of Motion guys and a few more people, and then Matt and myself. We fit in one booth at that place, and then I don't know if it was the same place. I can't remember now, but now it's that was Yard House where we met up, and now it's just like, gosh, how many people showed up last year is insane.
It was amazing.
So really looking forward to that. And you're there for Keyframes, and who are you technically with down there right now?
I got in a couple days ago to do some work stuff, but there's a ton of people. I think it says a lot about the industry, actually, that the LA Motion Plus thing could be going on, and then like a day or two later, on the opposite coast, a fairly large gathering of people can be happening like in the same time. But I don't think there's anybody from Motion Plus coming over here. But there's a lot of guys in the kind of motion design education world. So Joey's going to be here, Chris Doe's here.
Nice.
The guys from Workbench will be here. There's a whole bunch of other. Aaron Stern, I think EJ's here, and then a whole list of other people. I think Kyle Hamrick, Haley Akins from England from Motion Hatch is going to be here, and she's doing, I think, one of the 2 keynotes, which I'm really excited to hear.
Nice.
What she has to talk about. But yeah, I'm interested to see what the crowd is, because it's the first time they've done this conference. So I think it's definitely aimed at animation and kind of skill building. There's some kind of like entry level stuff, but there's some higher level stuff as well. I wish I could have gone to Motion Plus, because it kind of feels like it's in that spot right between Blend and kind of an NAB, where it's fairly technical, but there's people that are kind of talking more about big picture stuff and not just the normal tools and techniques.
Right. I know EJ is in Florida right now, I think, and David Brodeur, because he lives there.
Yeah.
And Matthias from Maxon is there as well. So if you see them, tell them I said hi.
I definitely will.
So if anybody's going, is there somewhere they could find you if they are going to be in Florida?
I think tonight there's a Universal City Walk meetup. But then I think Tuesday and Wednesday, it's pretty jam packed. I think there's like 3 full tracks of different things you can go through. So even all my talks are on Wednesday. So on Tuesday, there's so much stuff even I want to see that I had to make some hard choices on which ones I was going to go to and which ones I would have to miss, because they've got 2 or 3 things going on at the same time. But I'll be floating around. I mean, it's always the easiest way to get a hold of me is just if you reach out to me over Twitter or DM me. I can always find a way to meet you or talk to you or whatever. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of and access.
So we did hear from you at the Chicago Half-Res show that we did, and I know you talked a lot on the Monday meeting, but just for those who are hearing you for the first time, can you give everybody a little bit of your background in this industry?
Yeah, so I've been around for a while now. I'm right now, it's probably best to go backwards. It's probably the easiest way. But I'm a creative director at a company called Digital Kitchen. We have an office in Chicago, LA, and Seattle. I've been open for a long time, I think over 20 years. But I do a bunch of different things there right now. So we do really small jobs, like title sequences and TV commercials. But then we do a lot of bigger, weirder things too that take kind of motion graphics and animation into other spaces. So right now I'm building a giant hotel in Abu Dhabi based off of a movie studio that isn't Disney. And there's tons and tons of motion design, including stuff that has to do with kind of like VR, MR, AR stuff, plus traditional kind of, motion design, animation, live action, all that stuff. Before that, I was actually in LA for about 8 years. Most of that was spent at Imaginary Forces, but I freelanced also at places like Blur and Royale and Oddfellows. And then before that, I have a whole weird history of working as kind of, I did animation on slot machines. I did direct-to-home video stuff for like full-on straight character animation. I did documentaries, video game design. So it's a long, probably 10 years to get to where I basically was starting as a motion designer.
And did you have hair back then? Is my question.
No, I haven't had hair for a long time. Not that I started the trend, but I think I started going bald at like 17 or 18. So I just shaved it off. I just said, forget it.
Yeah, see, I recently went that direction. So
no, I saw that.
I'm an art director now.
Exactly. You're down at like a 1 guard or a 2 guard, it looks like.
Yeah, it grew out to that. I've just been doing a straight 0, but it grows it's very thin, but it grows really fast. I don't understand that, but.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I feel like I've given myself more haircuts than I ever did actually go and pay for haircuts before. I feel like I should get a credit for how many I have to do.
Yeah, it's so easy though.
It is. It's not bad.
It's so easy. I love it. I don't have to go anywhere. Yeah. So, and I don't have to do it anymore. That was my problem. I never did my hair. My hair was all crazy, and I had to remember to do my hair.
See, that's a life hack.
Yeah.
Isn't that a life hack?
Yeah,
give yourself like more time and money just by shaving your head every 3 days.
Yeah. Think how much that saves you over the course of your entire life.
Awesome.
At least a day.
At least over the course of 67 years, 1 full day comes back.
Right. So we've got a bunch of topics to talk about, as well as some questions. And then at the end, I guess if people have questions, we'll ask for them on the chat. So if you do have questions throughout this process, make sure you get those ready.
Cool.
The first thing that I thought we should talk about today is the hold system. I am not familiar enough with the hold system because I don't use it that much.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how you feel about the hold system. So I'm just going to let you have at it and and tell me what you think about it, and if there's anything wrong with it, what's wrong with it. And and I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Sure. I mean, this is coming from both sides of the equation, you know, because I've been a freelancer for a long time, and freelancer on the West Coast and freelancer remote. Before, I feel like it was really, there were a lot of people who were understanding remote freelancing or like kind of interested in it. But then now also kind of being on the other side of the coin, you know, trying to book people and get, you know, projects organized. I feel like it's an antiquated, unruly, but sadly kind of necessary evil in the industry. Theoretically, if anybody doesn't know, and I'll probably even mess it up because it's different everywhere. Theoretically, the hold system is, so say I'm a studio and I get a job offer, like an RFP coming in, where I know I have to pitch, and I use my in-house people to pitch it. But I know if I win in 2 weeks, I'm going to need 5 animators, and I only have 2 in-house that I can use. So I have to find 3 people. Typically, what I'll do is I'll work with a producer or a hiring or resource manager, and I will ask, you know, if I need 3 people, let's say, I'll probably ask 5 to 6 people to find out if they have availability. I was always amazed as somebody coming into the industry how much lack of information was kind of given by the studios to people. But generally, the system would be we ask hopefully just as many people as we need for the job. So if there's 3 positions that I need to fill, let's say a rigger, a lighter, and a modeler, or an animator, you know, some mix of skills across those 3. I go to those many people and they say, yes, I'd be interested in working, you know, in the next 2 weeks. I'll give you a hold. So essentially, as a freelancer, you say, I have a hold. So basically, I'm reserving your time, and what I should do as a studio, if I'm booking you, is I should say, you know, in 2 weeks I'll have the answer, and then I'll need you for 4 weeks. So I'd like to request 4 weeks of your time starting 2 weeks from now. Right? Should be fairly basic. The problem is it's convoluted, just because of client issues. You know, sometimes you think a decision is going to come in 2 weeks, and then it gets pushed by a week, or you know, whatever it might happen. The real big problem, though, is that there's a lot of kind of unscrupulous behavior, I think is the best way to say it, on the studio side. I see it sometimes with larger shops that have multiple jobs, shops that have larger pipelines, so like a visual effects studio or somebody who's doing multiple projects within one kind of job. So let's say they're doing McDonald's commercials and you have 6 of them. So what ends up happening is I use this term all the time. You find out people are spam holding. Like they're essentially going to every person they can kind of in a geographic area, and they just say, hey, we want to book you. And they don't say that they're trying to talk to like 15 or 16 or 18 people, and they might hold 3 times or 4 times multiple of what they actually need. I think that stuff is bullshit. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. No, you're fine.
I think that stuff's bullshit. I also am really amazed by the lack of kind of like personal touch when people try to hold people, whether it's whoever it might be, producers, hiring managers. A lot of times there's very little information given when you go to book. I was always amazed when I'm like, well, you said you needed a C4 artist, but what do you need? And they're like, oh, we just need somebody who can do 3D. And initially, that's almost always as a freelancer kind of a guide to me that they don't really know what they're talking about, or the project hasn't really been determined. Because like we all know now here, you know, 3D can be anything, right? Like, do you need a modeler? Do you need a lighter? Do you need an animator? Like even now, more so, like the permutations of octane, redshift, corona, X particles, Houdini, like 3D artists can mean so many things. Is it traditional motion design? Is it animation heavy? Is there character work? I might have to be doing something that's going to go out, you know, through Lottie to you know, actual real-time interfaces or whatever it might be. If you ever hear that, I always get frustrated. So what I end up doing on my side is I try to talk to every freelancer that I'm potentially reaching out to. So I normally will write up like the description for my producer or the hiring manager. And then once they know that there's a certain amount of people that we can talk to, I try to get on a phone or do this, you know, like a Skype or a Zoom meeting, just to find out, like, are you interested? Is there something here that you can add to besides just kind of like the button pushing and getting the work done? But I don't think that happens too much yet. I think that probably will happen more as we start doing more and more remote freelancing and less just like, hey, I'm calling you to come into my office. But I think as a counter to this, freelancers are starting to protect themselves. So you hear, you know, every book and every description, people say, take the first hold for yourself.
Right.
You've probably heard that before. Most of the time that normally just means anyone who calls you, whoever it might be, you tell them, hey, I have a challenge. That's where it starts getting weird. So theoretically, if you aren't doing this whole first hold kind of insurance layer for yourself as a freelancer, what would normally happen is, like, let's say as a freelancer, you have a hold with me at Digital Kitchen. But we haven't booked you yet, right? Like the 2 weeks has not happened to where I can say, yes, I can hire you because I haven't been awarded the job at Digital Kitchen. But in that meantime, in that 2 week window, Oddfellows calls you and says, oh man, we need you right now. We'd love to have you tomorrow, and we have the job. If you had a hold already kind of standing with me at Digital Kitchen, it's kind of the obligations for you to call Digital Kitchen and say, hey, I have a challenge. Can you book me now? What I like to do as a freelancer is I say, not just can you book me, but can you book me and match the time that this other studio would use me? So typically what happens is you have 24 hours to kind of just resolve that. So like if I was the freelancer, I would have to call Digital Kitchen right back and say, hey, someone's challenging for my time. Can you book me now? Can you book me for my rate? And can you book me for the time that Oddfellows was trying to book me for? If not, then the first hold is let go. And then the second hold basically moves into the first hold spot, and it's their chance to book you. Even that description is convoluted, but it gets even crazier when you have people, sometimes freelancers, like they want to work on a good job. So they'll hold 2, 3, 4 holds. And then instead of them being kind of in order, a freelancer will wait until they get enough information. It might be a day rate thing. It might be who I get to work with. It may be the type of project that you want for your reel. And then they'll kind of evaluate the whole landscape if they can get the information as quickly as possible. And then they'll just kind of pick. So instead of honoring the first, second, third, fourth, which I don't really blame anybody, if you were doing one kind of average thing and it was an explainer video and it was just, you versus getting to work with 4 or 5 other people on a title sequence, I get it. Sometimes people don't want to, pass on a good job. But I don't know. I feel like I haven't been in the industry forever, but for the last 5 or 6 years, the honor system has eroded a little bit, and everybody's trying to protect themselves. Studios trying to protect themselves. Freelancers try to get the best deals. I don't know how all your listeners, that was a long description, but how everybody thinks of it. It gets confusing. It takes a long time to talk it through. And then the other thing that's weird is you find out like different geographic areas, like studios like in New York kind of handle holds slightly differently sometimes than studios in LA. If you ever get approached by, studios internationally, they may not use the hold system or have a totally different system. It's really weird because it feels like it's the kind of thing that, app development or some type of like life hack productivity tool could be created to kind of manage all of it, where our industry is not that big. But at the same time, I don't know if everybody wants to be in like one collective database exposing when they're booked, when they're not booked, what their rates are, what their communication is. So it's one of those things that like it kind of also adds up to the whole idea of like why I think our industry will never be unionized, is that as long as there's enough work and there's enough people available to do the work, your ability to kind of move up very quickly and charge what you want or have your flexibility when you work, it's so much greater than like some kind of system that would be kind of instituted across the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of at the point where if somebody calls, and this is something I think we talked about a couple weeks ago, I think it was Dan Marino, I'm at the point where, because we do have multiple people here, and then we also have like an intern and we have a bunch of contractors we can contract out to if needed, we kind of treat ourselves a little less like contractors. And so what we're doing is if we get 2 people calls in one day, we just say yes, because we're going to be able to manage that somehow. I think that's kind of what a lot of contractors are doing now as well, because, typically your day is 8 hours long, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to you and they have something that they want you to do that day and you're already booked, it's like, you can kind of say yes, because if you want to, it's your choice. You can work another 8 hours that day, and make it a 16-hour day, or, do a day's worth of work in 6 hours like you do, and move on to the next thing. Do you think that there's a change coming? Do you think people are just going to give up on that? Do you think that the system's going to do you think it's going to disappear just because of how it is being taken advantage of?
I think we're in the middle of the change right now. I think it's one of those things you can't see until we're back on the other side of it. But I feel like there used to be kind of a fairly natural lifelines. Like you go to school, you go out and you freelance, you become a staffer somewhere. Eventually you either leave and go to freelance or you start your own company. And I think that whole model's kind of like blown out of the water lately. I think you're starting to see all kinds of permutations and stuff, right? So you might have more of like a print design shop where there's just 2 amazing people. Maybe somebody's great in the room with clients and they kind of do the the business dev and the kind of like client interaction, and then somebody else is kind of doing a lot of the actual kind of animation and design. You see that in like the print design world still. That's kind of an old model there. I think you're going to start seeing way more collectives where people are kind of loosely connected together, but they're not under any kind of like contracted LLC S corp kind of like real business where they're physically actually partners financially. And then I do think you'll start seeing more kind of smaller groups of people start very specific types of motion graphics companies, and they basically pass work back and forth to each other, but as real companies, like physical companies, right? So you might have people who are great at motion design, and then there's other people who are great at, I'm talking about like 2D kind of flat motion design. But say a job comes in where a proponent of that is more 3D. You may have a partner company that you kind of work with, and you trade work back and forth to get everything done. I think you're going to see a lot more people who, as they move their way through the industry, become creative directors, and they start getting relationships with multiple collectives or smaller companies. So as they go kind of a repped creative director, you see somebody like Colin Hesterly has done something like this before in the past, where he's repped with a director's company, a director's rep company who helps find work, goes to the directors go out and pitch. And then if they win the work, they align themselves with the studio, for that job. But they might not always work with the same studio based on the job or that studio's availability. I think it's going to get much more complicated, but there's going to be a lot more opportunities for people to work kind of like the way they want to, or with the relationships they want to, and at the risk level that they want to, right? Like that old model of like working somewhere freelance, becoming staff, or get enough experience and then go out and take a client with you and start your own company, that has so much risk. And as the world changes, where it's a lot easier to do stuff, through, as clients start getting used to doing Zoom meetings instead of having to fly somewhere, or a Skype meeting, and as more people in the agency world and client world get used to communicating daily through things like Skype, we all do it all the time. We already know this works. We've proven it, but you have to prove it to kind of the clients. I think it's gonna radically change. There's gonna be a lot of opportunity. I think there's gonna be a lot of people starting a company and then having it fall apart, and then starting a collective, and then. I guess the best way to say it, the volatility was fairly low and predictable the last 10 years. I think the volatility is going to get crazy. There's going to be a lot of wild successes. There's going to be people who you think should be amazing, but they just don't have the business sense. They start something and it folds, and then they go somewhere else to kind of rebound or recover. So I think there's going to be a lot more news. I think there's going to be a lot more people like, J.R. Knest at Motion Plus started a brand new company, and I'm sure he's been working out for a while. Ordinary Folk, and that sounds like, that's been a long time coming. I think we're going to see a lot more of that but I think the time will be shorter. Like, this is weird, but it's almost like the comic book industry a little bit, where you see people try to get to Marvel or DC to create a name. And then as soon as they have enough of a following or a name, they leave the comic book studio that they're at and they go to Image or another independent publisher. And that's where they make their money. It used to be the opposite. You do a bunch of little things to kind of create a name, and then you land for your kind of lifetime at like Marvel or DC, and you sign exclusive contracts. I think we're seeing the same flip. I wasn't expecting to make a comic book allusion to the motion design industry today. But I think it's something like that. There's so much more control for us. There's so much more power for us to kind of create our own companies, create our names, create voices, create products to sell, that I think we're in the middle of it. I think we're seeing it happen right now.
And what do you think about thought leaders? Actually, first of all, who do you consider thought leaders? Not necessarily our industry, or maybe both, but who would you consider? Would like Gary Vee, or?
I don't know. I have a big issue with like the whole thought leadership industry within a very small niche industry. I love, and I've always been a proponent of people who are always making product, getting a chance to become the product, right? So someone like Chris Do, who's been around for 20, 25 years, carries the authenticity, but carries the authority more than anything to be able to talk about the business world. I think, and Chris and I have talked about this a lot, I think that there's also a dangerous line, a dangerous threshold to where it gets a little bit hazy, when you start doomsdaying the industry, but then you also say, if the industry's dying, we all have to change, we all have to become thought leaders, whatever that his line might be. At the same time, there's a lot of people who are also saying, but I'll also sell you a $300 PDF on how to pitch a client. And he knows that. I mean, I think Chris is amazing at kind of setting a small fire and taking 10 steps back as it gets to be a larger fire, and then pointing like, look, there's a fire. Like, he's very good at that. And I think he's taking advantage of it. And I think he's doing a really great thing for a lot of people who would not have access to art-centered level education. And I'm saying, as somebody who literally, his previous partner before he switched to the future, I helped his partner who worked with him create kind of a podcast and a brand doing just this, but around kind of like design. So UI, UX, website design, that kind of stuff. And Chris kind of teamed with him and started taking this model. So it's something that's been brewing for a while. So someone like that, I may have issues sometimes, about how they do or what they do, but I fully applaud like the fact that they're doing it. I think that there's an epidemic kind of the VC funded kind of life hack hustle culture. I always call it the hack hustle hype culture. There's people who are getting starry-eyed by these 1, 2, 3, or 4 people that are out in the industry talking to everyone, not just our industry. Kind of selling this dream of the jab 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 hook, the whole thank you economy. Like, I get it, and I think that that's there, and I think it's really good to go after that. But I feel like there's been this weird permutation of pulling away from what this industry was about in terms of being able to express art in a very commercial world, to this is how I actually go and create my brand and create my passive economy lifestyle, my passive work-life balance. So I think there's good in it. I get tired of it sometimes when it's very obvious that that's the goal. Like, I'm going to try to create just a little bit of notoriety so I can kind of take 2 steps back and have people pay me to go and find more people to pay me. It gets very kind of like pyramid schemy. I think what it really comes down to is like transparency and authority for me. Like, if you have authority and you have 25, like if Michelle Doherty, all of a sudden started doing YouTube videos about her experience as a creative director for the last 20 years at Imaginary Forces, I'd watch that stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. I'd probably buy classes from her. When I forgot his name, Division 5, when he posts something, right? He had 3 or 4 YouTube tutorials about building demo reels and kind of talking about stuff, and then on how to work. And then he released 2 projects. Kerry Smith is his name. When he released 2 products on Gumroad about creating style frames, instantly buy, right? I'm doing style frames all the time. I'm not necessarily the person you think would have to buy it. I buy it in a heartbeat because he has the authority. Mm-hmm. He has the track record of doing it, and he has a really interesting, unique take on it. I love that stuff. But I feel like, I don't know. I feel like we're the thought leaders that currently are around in the industry. I feel like I'd love to see the people who they thought were thought leaders, and I'd much rather listen to those people. Like, I tell people all the time, Ash Thorpe is amazing, right? Styles is amazing. Starting the Collective podcast, wonderful. Kind of, mm-hmm. Before everybody else is doing it. Learn Squared is great. But I'm more interested in finding out about the people that inspired and drive Ash right now. Like, right. Than I am about seeing Ash's process. Like when I see his work and you can see the 3 or 4 kind of people that really drive him, I want to find out more about those people and what they've done. Right. Because the other big thing I think in this industry right now is that it's a huge echo chamber. I think that when you see one thing that becomes popular, and it's not just clients asking for it, it's us too, like the artist. When you see one thing become popular and you see all of a sudden tons of people following, and there's millions of likes and there's tons of conversation about how this person is the next kind of like genius, then all of a sudden you see a million things that look like it, and it waters down that kind of genius, right. Or it waters down that thing that you thought was amazing. I'd love to see more and more people dive into, I've said this a bunch of times, like, study the people that Ash studied and figure out why those things speak to you, rather than just study Ash and make his style over and over and over. Right. It doesn't really do you any service. And there's nothing wrong with learning. Like, there's a big distinction. I think there's a really great slide from Beeple at this Motion Plus thing where, there's nothing wrong with learning. There's nothing wrong with like maintaining essentially like a sketchbook, right? Like working on stuff. But trying to create a brand and trying to create an awareness based off of you emulating someone else's stuff is not very sustainable. But figuring out what your thing is and what your, Nick Campbell Spear thing is that you can then go and kind of build on top of, that's great. But I mean, this could be like an hour and a half, 2 hour long discussion. It's never ending. Well,
that's the thing, is it gets saturated because everybody all of a sudden is doing dailies that look exactly like everybody else's, and mm-hmm. everybody's essentially copying each other. But like you said, you want to know who those influences on those people are. If you look at Beeple, for example, and there's nothing wrong with emulating a style in order to figure out how to do it. Because if a client comes to you and they're like, well, we really like what Beeple does and we want to do this thing that kind of looks like that, if there's a reason for it, I understand that. Or if you're doing it for practice, I understand that. But then you're all of a sudden kicking out, Beeple knockoffs every single day for a daily for 2 years on your Instagram account and just getting a bunch of likes. Does it help you in any way? I don't feel like it would.
I mean, this is such a loaded conversation, and it's a conversation that hasn't stopped, for like 2 or 3 years. But I think for me, the divide line, like, there's a difference between technique and voice, right? When you look at Beeple's stuff, that I think some people are attracted by Beeple or Ash because they do make beautiful images, right? Like you cannot deny the fact that they make beautiful, arresting images that other people fall in love with. And I think that there is, just as an artist, or especially in our industry, a technician who is kind of, they see the allure of the art and they don't understand why or what it's doing, but they know that it affects them. But then they see this kind of like, I don't know, this kind of drug of everybody else liking it, and all of a sudden, like, oh man, like I think this thing is affecting me, but then look, it's affecting tons of other people. So if I could figure out how to make this thing, then I'll also have the same thing. But the big thing about it is, like, there's a difference between learning the technique of how to make a hexagon sphere explode in C4D, and then the reason why, and how something really interesting or new can change the discussion. So at a surface level, I totally understand wanting to learn the technique, right? That's great, but that's not something you have to necessarily throw on an Instagram every day, unless you're looking for feedback, right? Like, if your question is, hey, I made this thing, I love this artist, how am I not getting to where they're getting? Can you help me? That's a great discussion. That's a great thing to have. But the amount of, like, social media posturing that happens is kind of disturbing. The other big thing I'll say is, like, no one's hiring anyone to do that stuff, right? Like, I feel like 85 to 90% of the stuff you see people posting on Instagram or wherever they're posting it, that's just the one-a-day stuff. Like, even at the Beeple level, there's not a lot of clients that are saying, give me what Beeple does, but I don't want to pay him. Like there's a limited kind of set of that. For Beeple, it is because that's his voice, right? Like, Beeple's the equivalent of, again, like a comic book artist or an illustrator or a music video director. People want Beeple. Like, they want what he's doing because there's something behind all of the imagery, right? Like, you guys have Peoples, right? Like, the images are so alluring that you want to go and find out the story behind that. Right. Exactly. Like, there's power to that. There's inherently power to that. You taking the same idea and just changing the color palette, or learning about, like, the effects you can get out of Octane or Redshift, like, that is awesome to learn it, but then apply that to something you're interested in. I think what it basically shows is, like, twofold: that there's a lot of people who are technicians that are dying for the response that people are giving to art that's being made, right? Like, they're trying to do that. And there's other people who are just trying to find the following, just trying to find it. And it's never going to be anywhere near as effective or powerful as going out and making your own thing.
Yeah, what exactly does getting 100,000 followers do?
I mean, it makes you feel a lot better in the morning when you open up Instagram and you see, 100 responses. I'm sure that's that, but and I would say in some industries it really does make a difference. Like, I've seen everybody joking around about, like, showing your cleavage while you're playing video games or whatever those things might be, or like there's an industry where being able to get people's attention is incredibly powerful, whatever it might be. If you do really incredible memes, right? If you have the ability to go viral every fifth thing you throw up on Instagram because of its humor, like, that does have power and it does have currency. But I think in our industry, I've never had a moment. I've had to hire so many freelancers over the last year or two. I've never had a moment where I've hired someone because they have a certain amount of followers or a certain amount of likes. And I know that there's all this pressure. There's imposter syndrome. There's inspiration paralysis. There's a million other things out there that are affecting artists and people who are in the industry every day. But, like, I hire people because they're doing something interesting, or they're doing something that I feel like I have an opportunity that if this person who's starting to do something interesting gets to work on this client or this project, they're going to level up, infinitely more. I just hired a guy who, I teach at Mograph Mentor, and I'm going to set up a class at School of Motion in the next year. I have a guy who I taught at Mograph Mentor about a year and a half ago. He's older. He's been around for a while, and he's been trying to push his design style. He went to learn Squared. He's taking Nikhil's class today or now. But over the course of a year or two of, like, teaching him and working with him, and then just as a friend and as a mentor, helping him, like, move through, I hired him for a really intense project a few months ago. And to see him level up so quickly in a short amount of time, when he's under the pressure of being on an actual real project with deliverables and clients requests, and those really fast deadlines, like, it was amazing to see. It was amazing to see him go from, where he was here. And I'm at the point now where it's like, anytime I have a job that's within his voice, within his style that he's developing, he's my go-to guy now. That would never have happened just from randomly picking somebody off of Instagram because they have a lot of followers or likes.
Oh, you don't know how they work or anything else. And I know that some people do look at that following, and it's kind of a toss up to me, because, you know, I listen to people like Gary Vee who say, you know, you've got to have quantity out there. Now, he's not necessarily talking about motion graphics. You know, he might be talking about quantity of, you know, your Instagram feed, if you're some sort of influencer or one of those other D-bag words that I don't like. But when you're creating content and you're putting it out there, it is about quality. And so I'm trying to figure out what that balance is. Maybe put out quantity of quality stuff, meaning don't put stuff out every day just because. You know, maybe put stuff out every week, and after 52 weeks, you will have a quantity of 52 things if you want to go that route. But at least it's going to be something you spend some time on, instead of trying to just throw something together just because.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it distorts reality, and it puts a pressure on people to do some fairly nefarious things. It creates this kind of human behavior. Like the amount of people I've seen like copying and stealing and ripping off feels like it's just further escalating as more and more people start talking about the like pressure to have followers. But you know, I'm watching the chat, and like I'm talking specifically about motion graphics artists who are going to get hired by a studio to accomplish a project. If you're talking about a designer who is being looked at to help, you know, redevelop a brand or create a campaign that's different and has some notoriety, then of course it makes a ton of sense that like if I hire an artist that's working in kind of the art gallery world to help put a new spin on Reebok, then yeah, I can totally see an agency saying, hey, we hired this person, they have this many followers, they just have this gallery showing, and they've been written up on 3 websites of tastemakers. That totally makes sense. There's a world where that happens for sure. But I mean, I'm talking about the people who are living firmly in the world of like watching people, seeing his one-a-days for a decade, seeing other people and saying like, I want that, I want that notoriety. I don't think most motion design artists are looking to have their designs be put on T-shirts at a fashion week runway show, right? Like I don't think that's what most people are chasing people's likes for. If it is, then great. Yeah, like there's a lot of techniques and a lot of things to learn about doing that. But for me, I'm more interested as somebody who's hiring people for fairly high profile projects, for very deep projects with a large pipeline. You know, like I'm looking for people who have a story that they're trying to tell, or have a vision about their art, that if I can help them by giving them the opportunity, by working on a project that's way bigger than they would normally have access to, or they have an art style that I can help, you know, craft a story with for a brand or for a client, then that's what I'm looking for. Does that mean that I spend a lot of time on Instagram looking at people's stuff? Absolutely. But I'm not looking at the trending people. I'm not looking at people who have like tons of followers. I'm down in the weeds looking and seeing what people are doing, people who comment on other people's stuff and have questions. So Instagram is definitely important, but I don't think it's important in the way that people kind of have this fear or paranoia of.
Yeah, that's what really gets me about, like, first of all, I think Instagram is probably the least, how do I put this? The least time wasters for me, anyway, because if I'm on Instagram, I'm just floating through some pictures, seeing what everybody's doing. I don't really stay there too long.
Right.
But I do see that those people that are on that level of, they're trying to trick the algorithms and all that. You post like a photo of you and somebody hanging out at a motion graphics event, and the comment is, wow, that renders hot. And you're like, what? Because they're just throwing out just garbage. I don't feel like there's any value in doing that. What are you aiming for?
Well, I mean, it all goes back to like, what's your goal, right? Like, that's why I think like this obsession with kind of like Tim Ferriss, Gary Vee, and the whole litany of other people, and like Christo kind of ventures into that territory by, trying to post YouTube videos that mention Casey Neistat or Peter McKinnon, in the title, and it has nothing to do with like the job. Like, I get that, but to some degree, I feel like so many more people are now. That kind of impetus is now there's this like wave that's crossing over the entire industry, saying like, I have to do that too. I have to feel this pressure that I have to compete. There's something about like Instagram and social media, and even like Slack and all these other places that it feels like you're doing something, like you got work done today if you spend enough time doing it, right? Because like you feel like, oh, I posted here and I did this and I talked to this person, and I made this effort. But I feel like it's I call it cheap heat or fast food kind of like social media, because it makes you feel like you did something, but as soon as you've done it, it almost goes away just as fast. right?
Yeah.
It goes through your system, but you feel like you've done something, that your body is processing something. Versus the really difficult task of being like, I'm going to design 3 logos this week, or I'm going to come up with 5 style frames for a spec project, or I'm going to animate something that I have no idea what it's going to do for me if I do it. That stuff's hard. That stuff's really difficult to like sit down and do it. Like I tell people all the time, like instead of doing dailies, I'd much rather have people do weeklies or monthlies, where have an end goal, right? Like there's nothing wrong with dailies. I say it all the time. Like I think it's just more like that's a sketchbook. Then that's like a great place for you to learn stuff and ask questions and create community between people. That's great. But if you want to have something that's going to have impact and show off, say at the end of the month you're going to have a 10-second animation, and every 2 days post your progress on it. Post like, oh man, I started drawing for the first time. I've never done it before. These drawings are awful, but can you tell what I'm trying to say? Can you give me some feedback? 2 or 3 days later, post your first kind of wireframe play blast of 5 shots together. You know, like show people that process. People will fall in love with behind the scenes for a short way much more than just here's some pretty pictures. All that does is create envy and jealousy amongst people. Or it creates people doing exactly what you said, like what renderer, like first, what render, like that stuff. Like, I could care less about those discussions. Like there's a quality of discussion like that you're looking for to kind of generate if you are going onto Instagram as a way to promote yourself to find more work. I feel like there's easy changes you can make in kind of like your social media kind of philosophy or your kind of like marketing branding agenda as a like an individual freelancer that can make a big difference.
There's people that like you said that come on and watch a video and get on Instagram, or like you said, the first thing they say is, okay, what render engine was that? Because you know, I'm going to make this thing with this great storyline and this great composition and all that if I just could buy a $300 copy of Octane. And then there's those people on Instagram that you look up to and you don't see any of the behind the scenes. You don't see the struggle. You don't see them messing with something for freaking 12 hours because it wasn't working. And then they just realized that, you know, there was, you know, something ticked off in their Windows settings that wasn't making it not work. You know, you don't see any of that stuff. And I feel like if you're posting online and you're posting more of your process and you're talking about it more, that's more real. You know, if you're doing a sketch, and then it also helps keep you accountable if you're posting that progress. You know, I saw something the other day that said, and this, I kind of believe this and I kind of don't, but it said, don't talk about what you're going to do before you've really done it. But I think that there's a balance in there, because I feel like if you're talking about what you're going to do, like if I say, this is what we're going to do on the next episode, then I've kind of made myself accountable for that. Yeah. You know, because, okay, now I really have to have this ready, because people are going to be like, well, you didn't do that thing, which I've not delivered on things before. But there's just, I don't know, there's a weird balance in there. I feel like that's almost walking the shoreline. Here's what we're going to do. You talk about it, you get feedback from people, you feel like you have some sort of accountability. And in social, when you're posting your process, that feels more like something that actually will get good quality followers, people who want to see your process, because they're not in it just to see like the cool render. Like they want to know about the process, about the composition, about how you went about trying to figure out an actual storyline for something, instead of just throwing a bunch of geometry inside of a window in Cinema 4D and hitting render.
I totally agree. I mean, it comes down to intent, right? Like in my mind, a lot of people are conflating what kind of like YouTube and Instagram celebrities are searching for, because that system is gamed. That like YouTube and Instagram ecosphere has certain things you have to do to create success for that platform. But your platform in this industry is your career, right? Like It really is. How good is your work? Are you transparent, honest, and accountable? And what's your relationships with your network like? Like what's the quality of your relationship? So that's what I always go back to, is that I think people are getting lost in this whole like Gary Vee, YouTube celebrity, Instagram star, those tips and tricks in gaming the system. And they get so caught up in that, but that's not really what applies. Like the medium of those places are great for us, right? But in my mind, if you have 500 or 1,000 high quality followers, or whatever you want to call it, your network of people are people who ask real honest questions, who are there to help you this as much as you're there to help them, who work at places that you want to work at, that they believe in your story and your efforts will root for you. 500 to 1,000 quality followers or your network is way better than 100,000 random people who say what rendering, right? Or just like, I think people are getting caught up because there are some kind of tastemakers and thought leaders in the industry that are selling this kind of snake oil dream of, wow, this is what you can do. You can never work a day again, and you can have passive income. You can be a thought leader too. You need to be a lifestyle coach for other people coming into the industry. You can sell, HDRI packs, and you can sell your tutorials on Gumroad, and you can have a Patreon of people, sending you, 5 times your day rate. If you just do these 10 things and pay me enough money to teach you how to do it. I think there's a great idea to have supplementary income. I think passive income is great, but let's not put the cart before the horse that like you need a good career, you need a good body of work, people need to trust you, and you have to offer value to them in that industry, right? Like no one's going to get excited watching you animate your stuff enough to where there's going to be 3 million people paying you $5 a post on Patreon. Like that, this is just not that the industry is not like that, right? But that's not to say that you can't have. I looked to this guy, Jake Parker. He's amazing comic book artist. He's done a ton of great stuff for Blue Sky early on in his career during like the Ice Age kind of films. And he has a great YouTube and Instagram where he does talk a lot about, how to kind of create your own product and create your own following and talk about your own story. But he does it in like in a really organic way that has like real true relationships as the basis of like the beginnings of a network. And I feel like there's a lot of direct analogs for that into our industry, specifically.
The thing that actually helps me more is collaborating with people who are better than me. Without going into too much detail, I was working on a project last week with Phil, Raid Zero, who's in the chat now, and David Aryev. And we were bouncing things off of each other all week. And just this project kept getting better and better and better. And I was like, I don't really like how this is going. What would you do here? And that bouncing off with people like that. First of all, I was working with Aryev, who the type of thing we were working on, it's very much in his wheelhouse. And so I'm like, okay, I have to prove that I can do this on one hand. So it made me work even harder. But that bouncing off, I learned so much in bouncing off and experimenting and making something happen last week than I could have learned just sitting by myself, just trying to do it daily. And to me, that's more important. So these social engines and all this stuff, they come and go. So I feel like that part of it is something that's kind of out here to the side, because you're still going to be doing motion graphics at the end of the day. You're still going to be doing motion graphics if Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everything went away. I think that also kind of leads into another topic, which is kind of flipping it the other way. We're talking about posting things for people to consume, but what about the things that you consume, and how much of it is even relevant, and how much of it is too much? Facebook. I mean, Facebook makes me crazy sometimes, but I'm still there.
I mean, I think it's a great discussion. It's a great kind of compliment to all this stuff, right? So like what you put out into the world and what you take back in is really important, right? Like not in even just like a metaphysical way, but just like in a little time management. What am I going to get out of this, and what can I put back? I keep on going back to this whole idea, right? Like I think the industry is too much of an echo chamber. We hear the same small percentage of people telling people what to do and where to go and what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. We see the same art styles constantly. It feels like with the advent of 3D rendering, or with real-time rendering working on real-time rendering in another project, with the advent of GPU-based renders, right? Like Octane, Redshift, all that stuff, the access to have photorealism has kind of created this like huge chase for who can be the most photoreal, right? But there hasn't been an increase in wildly creative stuff happening way more often. Like it's the same thing with the music industry, right? Just because you can pretty much do anything you could have done in a $10,000 a day studio, it doesn't seem like there's a lot more great music out. Like there's a lot more noise to kind of search through. Right. But there's not a lot of just all of a sudden. I would almost argue that it feels like there's less great music that everyone reacts to at the same time, just because there's so much more music. And I feel like it's the same thing in our industry. Like there's a ton of very similar looking stuff. But I agree. Like there's this pressure. I mean, I'm sure I feel it. I think everybody feels it. There's a pressure to always be, timely and up to date with everything that's going on. So it's like in my morning routine, I'm sure everyone has this, right? So you check Slack, you look at Twitter, you check Instagram. You go back to Slack because three people might have commented on something you said half an hour ago. Maybe you do a little bit of work and then you go back at lunch or whatever it might be. The thing that kind of blows my mind recently, and maybe stop me if this is too off the beaten path, but there is a small percentage of very loud voices kind of in the motion graphics like ecosphere that I don't know how they get work done because they're everywhere all at once seemingly. And they always are they have a certain amount of cynicism or negativity or kind of just general, just like, I don't know if toxic is the right word, but generally kind of just like this is shit or this is garbage or this program sucks or this is never going to get better. But it's like a constant never ending just presence that I feel like a small percentage, and maybe this is the same thing in the world with like just Twitter in general, but like I hear people come out of Facebook, right? Like I have an account, but I don't ever look at it. I don't have anything to do with it. But I hear the same complaint from other people that like people who are on Facebook a lot have a very skewed, very negative, very cynical view of the world and very competitive, to be honest, view of the world. Versus people who I see who do other social media or just like they use social media casually to kind of stay up to the news, but they're not living it, right? Their entire existence and persona isn't tied into that specific social media kind of presence. And I feel like that's really like our industry is a really tight microcosm of that kind of social thing, right? Like there's just this omnipresent kind of just negative, shitty take on the world for motion graphics that I don't know about you, but I just feel like some days I'm like, I just want to disengage because I can't go to Slack or a beta forum for a software or Twitter or Instagram or something without like, all of a sudden there's just like, why is there just like this negative feeling? Like our industry, for the most part, to be honest, has a lot of work to be done to it, right? There's a lot of stuff that needs to change in the software. There's a lot of stuff that gets scary sometimes with day rates or with people getting booked or, trends of companies opening and closing. We have a ton of stuff to do with diversity and helping different voices make its way into the industry. And that's a whole other talk. But for the most part, like the software we have accessible to versus what we had not that long ago, the capabilities of what we can do with one person, or like we said, a collective of 4 or 5 people versus having to go to the West Coast or to New York City to get better, like versus 5 to 6 years ago is insane. Like what we actually have capable of doing, the possibilities are so much greater than what they were a short time ago that I feel like social media automatically trends to cynicism for whatever reason right now. And there's definitely days like I have to manage it. There's definitely days where I'm like, you know what? For one, I don't know how some of these people like get work done because they're living in these kind of places. And I think the people that are like that, they do it because they feel like they're creating a persona that has value. And I get that 100%. But it is that idea, man, just like the smallest group is sometimes the loudest, and they most of the time tend to be really cynical and negative.
I was kind of that way in the beginning days of Facebook because back in the day, it wasn't something where you share articles about how much you hate Donald Trump or something on a regular basis. Right. It was something where you actually type text. This before pictures really even started getting big on there, right? It's just you're doing these little snippets and stuff, and kind of like Twitter. But I would use it as an outlet for things, right? Where everybody else was posting sunshines and rainbows. Oh, I love my husband so much. We never have any problems. And I would post stuff like, man, at the line at DMV, I can't believe that this is still a problem going to the DMV after so many years. And people would be like, he's so negative. And I'm like, I'm just kind of live blogging snippets of things. Right. But it's usually in that situation. You're sitting at the DMV with nothing to do and you're pissed off because you've been there for 3 hours just to get your photo taken, and you write that, so that was an outlet for me. Now it feels like it's just pure boredom that I scroll Facebook, just complete boredom, because I've gotten to the point where I've weeded out, and I don't necessarily think this is a good thing, but I've weeded out accidentally the people that don't agree with me on things like politics, because they got so sick of me. I'll just say they got so sick of me telling them why they're wrong that they just stopped following the posts that I post about whoever. But so now it's just me going through, I'm looking at these articles, and I realize that I am just doing this as a time waster when I'm sitting in the bathroom, you know? And so we actually, we got this link from Glenn, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's in the chat right now. Glenn Dyer, who said, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but afraid to do because now I'm connected to free flowing ideas, which is deleting your social media accounts. But if I quit, I go backwards. Or if you listen to the dude in this video, you go forwards because you become a more productive and you're free of your addiction. And and this is something that I have to force myself to do when I go too far down the boredom hole, is at least delete the Facebook app off of my phone, because it is a pain to even surf Facebook on a web browser on your phone. And that kind of pulls me back a little. And I have noticed I got really bad just scrolling, share that, share that, share that, share that. And I don't even care to see what the comments are on it. I'm just like scrolling and looking. And so in the end, it becomes such a time waster, because then I realize I've just been looking blankly at crap for 45 minutes on my phone, sitting on the couch. And now, and I got to that point, I deleted Facebook off my phone again. And now I'm at the point where like, I feel like, wow, I somehow have a lot of time to get stuff done. I didn't realize how much time I was wasting in a day. So this video is talking about deleting all your social media accounts, and he prefaces it by saying, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you this is what you should do. I'm just telling you how this can help you. And we'll post a link to that in the show notes. But what do you think about maybe not necessarily unplugging fully, but finding a way to really draw that back?
I think it's just like dieting. I think it's just like examining, like how to lose weight or have a healthier lifestyle, right? Like, I think the first step to do, I did this last year, the first step to do is spend like a month basically just collecting data, right? Like, don't change your behavior at all. Just find a way, whether there's an app or there's a physical thing, or you just set a timer. But for a month, just capture how much time you're spending on the various kind of ways you're spending your time, right? So if it's on Reddit, or it's playing video games, or it's social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, like whatever it might be, right? Like just evaluate it. And then after those 30 days, really look and see like there's direct analogs to dieting or losing weight or living healthier, right? Like you'd be like, oh man, like I didn't realize like how many carbs I've been eating. I've been eating like a pig. I think there's the equivalent to Facebook, right? And you're like, oh, but like I barely spend any time, like eating protein. And maybe that is interacting on Slack, a small private Slack, channel, not like MDA or necessarily even Brograph, but something where it's just, you and 50 people that are working on projects or something. Like, wow, I could put a lot more time into that, because I didn't do much of it because it means I have to do hard work. But when I did do it, it made me feel a lot better. And then I think you have to make a plan. Like there's some people who do crash diets, right? Like there's some people who are just like, you know what? I'm cold turkey stopping everything. There's nothing but protein and water for the next month. I want to see what that does to me. That works for some people. Some people, you can't do that, right? Like some people, it will lead to worse behavior. But I do think it's important to understand why you spend the time doing it, because I do think it's like that fast food philosophy, right? Like sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're frustrated, sometimes you're depressed, sometimes you're mad. And doing that stuff as a vent or whatever it might be, it feels good. And then the feeling good just continues, whatever.
And then it turns into something negative, Can you still hear me?
I still hear you, but it changed a little bit. It sounds a little different.
I think what happened was my audio, my AirPods might have just died because we've been going for a long time.
Oh.
So I think my recording just stopped too, because it changed on Audition. It changed the audio.
Oh, okay. You need to switch mics.
Yeah, I probably should. It's gonna sound the way it is now, but I need to switch mics. I'll switch mics in the audio hardware preferences, and then I don't know if I have to restart or not, but I'll try that. Does that sound okay?
Well, I don't think you have to restart. You should be able to just continue on.
Okay, cool. Let me see if I can just change the preferences.
Yeah. I set a marker, so we're good here.
Okay, cool. Inputs. I'll just take these out then. Can you still hear me now?
Yeah, you sound
okay, cool.
You sound fine.
All right, I'm gonna start by
a lot of people actually say it sounds better now.
Oh, jeez, awesome. Well, hopefully,
make sure you save your project.
Yeah, I'm gonna save the clip right now.
Yeah.
Sorry about that for everybody listening, having to listen to all this.
That's all right.
Cool. Awesome. Make sure I'm saving. I'm saving as a WAV file. That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. Has this been going okay for everybody? Is this an interesting? We haven't talked about. I feel like every time I get on Brograph, we never talk about like render engines or.
Oh yeah, I got a little bit of that in here. We can touch on that in a minute. Yeah.
because I'm going through right now the whole like which engine to base our entire network on or our pipeline on. All right, I'm gonna do, and I know there's, you know me, render wars is my least favorite thing to talk about, but I do think. Let's see, continue. 1 second. Let me get this right back up. All right. Should we do a?
Yes. Are you recording again?
Oh, wait a second. Audio hardware says there's a problem with it. Default input, default output, speakers. 1 second. I'm gonna keep trying. Let's see if I can get this going. Okay, I'm going again now.
All right, cool. All right, here we go. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3. All right.
Awesome. Cool. So what were we talking about? What were we finishing on?
The Facebook social stuff.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's like working out. I think you have to basically spend a good amount of time like evaluating what you're doing. I think we do it because it feels good and it's easy, right? Like it's something easy to just kind of go through, just like one-a-days. But I go back to the same thing. I think lesser, higher quality interactions with people provide a lot more valuable or a lot more value. And I can give you 2 examples, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this time last year, I was getting really frustrated with just the kind of level of conversation that was going on Twitter specifically. I love Twitter. I live and die there. There's always great conversations, but I think with lots more people on it, the general toxicity of just society in general around that time, and then seeing things like Slack and Instagram and a bunch of other places, I changed the way I work, right? So I basically always looked at my Twitter fire hose, like just the stream of stuff that comes in. And I think I follow like around 2,000 people, and it was just getting too much. So I found out from a friend of mine that works at Twitter that one, you can make Twitter lists, and in those lists, none of the ads come in it, right? So if you follow just a Twitter list versus your massive, all your followers, it's a much cleaner conversation. So I made a mograph, I think it's called Mograph Monsters, like a specific Twitter list of the people I follow on Mograph or in the motion graphics industry, right? Which has been great. And then I open it up to people. So if they wanted to have the same thing, you can follow it and you can also be included in it, which that was awesome. And then what that led to was me starting to do these open office hours. So partially because I didn't, like Chicago hasn't been as like artistically driven and motion graphics driven as what I found in LA. I was finding that I was missing the kind of just conversations that I would have, like real conversations like this.
Right.
But like in the office. And part of it is also just at Digital Kitchen, pretty close to when I started, we made kind of a right turn in terms of the way we staff and the kinds of projects we go afterwards. So I was just missing like whatever it might be, doing this, talking about, you know, man, did you see the new C4D thing that Merck put out? Did you see this animation? So, and I still am doing it now, but I basically using this thing called Calendly. I opened up my lunch.
I love that. I use it all the time.
It's awesome, man. I opened up my lunch hour basically in 15-minute increments or 30 minutes if you want to do like a demo reel review. But anybody, unless I have a crazy schedule, anybody can schedule any of my time from 12 to 1 o'clock Central Time and reserve like 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And if you come to Chicago, I even have like, you can come and grab lunch and you can go get food together. And that has been amazing. Last year, I think from end of March to the end of the year, I did 188 talks with people at lunch. And it was awesome. It was just great. Like I got to meet a lot of people. I got to talk to people at all levels, right? So like the first person to talk to me was the guy who opened and closed Superfad, one of the owners. Couldn't believe it. I just announced it on Facebook or on Twitter. Hey, if you want to talk to me, just, you know, hit me up here and let's talk. It was amazing. And then since then I've done tons of demo reel reviews. Like I'll have people actually send me their demo reel. I'll mark it up on Frame.io and then we'll just go for a half an hour and just like break it down. I'll talk about, you know, what I think can be done, suggest ideas for projects to make it better. And then people check in every 2 or 3 months, you know, to see progress on the reels. Sometimes it's just like a micro version of this. Like, do you have questions about the hold system or how to get booked or, you know, like what to do if you want to become a creative director? And it's been amazing, like game changing. And I've suggested to a bunch of other people, and I know there's other people doing the same thing where they offer up their time. And then this year I wanted to start another thing, like a new thing that's a little bit more focused. And it's in beta right now because I wasn't sure if it would work or not. But on Sundays after I teach my mograph mentor class, I do a thing called, right now it's called the Carbon League, but it's basically a mograph mastermind. So I invite 6 people to work with me for an hour and a half every Sunday on their personal projects. So the first week, the whole team pitches, what do you think you can get done in 12 weeks for a personal project? So some people, it might be a new demo reel. Some people, it's like, I want to do all the storyboards for a short. Some people have a project they've been working on for 3 or 4 years and they never finished and they just have shelved it. But we have 6 of us, including me right now, that are working on personal projects, and we basically hold each other accountable. It's a great place to get kind of like the same set of eyes reviewing your work week to week. And it was basically built off the idea of at Pixar, they have the brain trust, where they don't have one CEO that's basically running everything, or one executive director for creative that tells everybody if it's working or not. They basically have a team of 8 people that they look at every project, whatever project's going on, if it's a live project, if it's being directed right now, if it's a pitch, and they all evaluate it together. It's pretty amazing. And you get a variety of opinions and a variety of experiences. So right now, I think it's going really well. It's great to see people just every week putting stuff together, pitching the room. Sometimes the projects get completely changed. It starts off one thing and it changes to, to a totally different area. Sometimes it's just like 15 minutes to vent. But I feel like for the 5 other people and myself, it's been incredibly powerful. So because I see those people kind of spending a little less time on social media. Like I don't see them posting as much, but when they do post, the posts are a lot more focused. I see people posting, oh man, here's my process, here's my drawings. The next week on Instagram, I see 3 renders, and I see people talking to them a different way, right? They're like, oh shit, how did you do that from one week to another week? Internally, the thing that's been really interesting is like the people in it, they never feel like their progress is very fast or that they're making leaps. Right. But then the 5 other people around them are like, oh man, I wish I could have gone that fast in a week. Like, how are you going so fast? How are you learning so much? Or how are you, doing so many storyboards? And that kind of stuff is small, right? Like it's not a gigantic change. It's not changing the whole industry. But if all of a sudden there were 10 more people running masterminds where they're all, or whatever you want to call it, where they're all helping each other, that example can really make a big difference from the way you use social media. Like these are all people, most of them have never met in real life. They're all people that, like we've just known each other, or someone mentioned to someone, hey, you should try doing this. That to me has been, to get back to the thing about what do you think about Facebook and social media, that's the way I'm trying to use social media in a way that's positive for me and hopefully for other people.
I got another question here. This is from Pedro, who is also in the chat, I think. Okay, if we take into consideration the scarcity principle, do you think that more people accessing the motion graphics industry is bad for the business regarding what artists can charge for their work?
I know this comes up all the time, and I know this comes up all the time because I've had, I do these open office hours. I've actually had a small percentage of people reach out to me without telling me ahead of time. And when we finally get on it, they basically tell me I'm ruining the industry. Or people like Chris or you guys or Andrew or Grayscale Gorilla are basically ruining the industry, and it's going to contribute to its downfall. And I don't, in our world, I don't buy into the scarcity principle.
I've gotten that comment before.
For the majority of the people in the industry, I don't buy into it. If you're in the industry, the people who I will say I think the scarcity principle is directly affecting today are the people that, the kinds of people that do reach out to me that are upset about that stuff. And what I think happens is, in our industry, I think most industries are like this, any industry that's driven by tech initially has a certain percentage of people who got in because they were an early adopter of the technology, but they didn't grow, whether it's creative or their network or their communication skills. And what's happening now is the technology is ubiquitous, right?
Right, like you might have been like the only person who knows Octane at a place because technically you know how it works, but you were the only person. But then a bunch of people came in who knew Octane and knew how to actually tell a story with it.
Right, exactly, and that's what I find myself running into. And I think for those people, scarcity principle is true because the amount of positions for someone who's a technician that doesn't know design fundamentals, that doesn't know storytelling, that can't communicate, and doesn't have a network. Yes, true. Those jobs are very scarce, and they're going to become more scarce to the point of not existing. That's true. I don't think the amount of work that's out there for someone who does have interest in those things is getting scarce at all. I do think that it will be more competitive, but I think that from my point of view that I'm seeing with the influx of AR, VR, MR, real time, real-time engines shouldn't be called gaming engines. They're just engines that
right.
show data in real time, right?
Right.
Like there's so many applications for that coming in the next few years. When you look at things like body moving and Lottie, when you look at the ability to take real-time data and present that in a way, you know, that gets broadcast live at the same time with interactions on top of it. I hate calling them screens. I've said this, I think, even on the previous time. The amount of canvases that are available, ready and waiting for artists that are not even trained yet to use them properly
exactly
is massive. Like, and I will say this, and I probably said this before, and I know it pisses people off. When I was in LA, and now that I'm in Chicago, every studio I've ever worked at cannot find enough highly qualified people to work on the jobs that we have at hand now, not the influx of jobs in the next 2 or 3 years that are coming down the line that include real-time or Houdini or AR or VR. I don't believe that there's any scarcity in work. The scarcity is in the people who can do the work for the foreseeable future right now. I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure.
Well, that's how I feel about it. The book that School of Motion put out, the ebook. It's what is it called? Experiment, Fail, Repeat. There's some really, really great stuff in there. Minus my stuff. My stuff's not that great. But what I wrote in there, because there was a question about where things are going, right? And so this is the way I look at it, is that I think I put it in terms of like, when the cup on your desk has to have motion graphics in the future, you know there's going to be a lot of need for people who can do stuff. Okay, so maybe not every single person in the future is going to be Ash Thorpe, right? But there's going to be a need for somebody to, and it's not going to be After Effects, it's going to be some sort of program that lets you do like comping mixed with real time and AR and whatever that is, in order to put those graphics on that cup. And so when you drink it, like a little meter comes up on it and says how much is left and whether or not you need to reorder more for the fridge. Like in 20 years, like that's how it's going to be. And there's going to be people for all those positions.
Absolutely. The only thing I'll counter to that is last week, Nike put out their self-lacing shoes. I forgot, it's like the Nike BB. I can't remember the name of it. And they bricked everyone's left shoe within the first 3 days because it's connected to an app, right? And if you had the Android version of the app, I'm sorry, if you had the iOS version of your app, no problem to sync to it. You could adjust the tension and you could lace and unlace the shoes, right? If you had the Android app, it was done by a different development team. The left shoe lost connection to the device, and the left shoe would basically, it would brick itself, right?
Oh, gosh.
So imagine, I mean, we're dealing with that, right? Like shoes need your cell phone to be able to work. But imagine in a world where Nike collaborates with Apple and they create you know, the next Apple Nike specs, right? And you wear these, like, you have your Apple phone, you have your Nike shoes, you have your Apple Watch, and you have your whatever Nike Apple glasses. But on the glasses, wherever you run, you can literally see where your next step should be. And if you wanted to increase your speed, you could see where in red is your actual predicted step, and in blue is where you should be in a certain amount of time. Or if you wanted to race against yourself, essentially like a ghost mode of like, oh, this is my fastest 5-mile run I ever did, you could actually see in your glasses the ghost version of you, or a celebrity, or Kelly Clarkson, or Kim Kardashian, or whatever it might be. That's what I mean about like canvases. There's someone who needs to make the UI, the UX, and the animated visuals for that. That's in our industry. It's going to explode. It's ridiculous. So the amount of people that can actually do that, they need to exist. They need to be trained, because you know what? There's maybe 100 Ash Thorpes in the next 20 years, right? But I don't even know what that really means, because like we just lost Richard Greenberg and Pablo Ferro this week. I just watched the in memoriam for the Oscars, right? The two most important, most famous title designers that I bet more than 50% of the industry of people who work in motion design don't even know their names, right? There were only 2 of those people, maybe 3 if you added Saul Bass, before Kyle Cooper came around, right? Kyle Cooper came around and title design was a big thing again. There's a ton of people working on title design, right? Yeah. There's only 7 or 8 people you can call out their names. But that doesn't mean that like the industry's dying or that you have no future, right? Like there's tons of opportunity, there's tons of roles, there's tons of salaries waiting out there for you to provide for you and your family doing lots of this work. Like you said, it may not be, my best experience, to give you an example, is I worked at a slot machine company early on in my career we were doing 2D animated video slot machines, right? And I came in, I was the first 3D person, and the industry really quickly went from 2D to 3D. We started hiring a ton of Disney animators right at the end of like Lilo and Stitch and Lion King, right at the end where like they were closing down a lot of their 2D companies, the other studios besides the one in Burbank. So I got to hire a ton of people that were amazing 2D animators from the Orlando studio. And then those people all pretty much got fired within 2 to 3 years because they refused to do anything other than draw on paper. They refused to draw in Flash. They refused to learn After Effects. And there's, I think, 2 guys out of the 7 or 8 that we hired that are still working in the industry. The rest, I don't know what they're doing. And they disappeared almost instantaneously. And those are guys who spent 20 years becoming master craftsmen. Amazing. People who worked on all the animated movies that people remember from their childhood, right? Properties that are still generating hundreds of millions of dollars because they're being remade shot for shot in CG by Jon Favreau for no good reason, right? Other than money. But that's the same thing in any creative industry. Like I guess the shortest story I can say is that if you're an artist, part of the DNA of an artist is that you're always going to be learning. There's never going to be a time that you learned it all. And there's never a time that you have to stop communicating and sharing knowledge with other people to get better. If you're
ABC, always be learning.
Yeah, and if you don't want to do that, just understand that like your time is limited. Like that's the nature. It's just like being an athlete, right? You can't be an athlete expecting to never have to work out or practice. Every athlete knows that. They rue the day that they physically can't do it anymore. But they know Michael Jordan shot more fucking free throws than any other person in the history of man, even when he was the greatest player that ever lived the game. He stopped shooting free throws when he stopped playing, right?
Right. And I feel that way when it comes to some of the new technologies, that if I don't keep up with it, I'm going to be in that same position where, oh, well, all I can do is like pre-made things that have to render first. I can't do any of this real time, whatever, you know. And you got people like Brandon Clements, who is just mixed in this game of 3D, AR, VR, video games, rendering, Maya, Cinema 4D. He can do a little bit of everything, and he's got that advantage because he's going that direction right now already. But 20 years from now, are you going to be strictly a Cinema 4D artist? I would say probably not.
No. But he'll still be an artist. I mean, there's this super cheesy line about Wayne Gretzky where he said that he didn't skate to where the puck is, he would skate to where the puck is going. Right. I think there's an analogy, but there's one step even further, is that as you go along, and someone like him or someone who's been in the industry for 15 years and is observant to the way things going, you can go where the puck is and you could probably miss it pretty quickly. You go where the puck's going, you'll probably have a decent career. What the real goal should be is that you decide where the puck gets to go, right? Like that's the goal. That's what I always talk about, like voice and vision and figuring out like where you want to be later. That doesn't necessarily associate you with software or hardware, right? Like I bet 5 years ago, anybody in the industry never thought if they've been working on a Mac that they would ever be on a Windows machine.
Oh yeah, for sure. But you have to, and this was something that Barton told me actually when I was on the cusp of moving to PC, is like, you have got to keep up with the technology and stop holding on to the old stuff. You just have to do that and move forward. And that's what he was doing. He had moved to PC at that point. Yeah. And also you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Who would have thought we'd be making so many sports and comic book analogies today?
Right. All right. Well, I've got a bunch of other topics here. We're about an hour and a half in, so we're doing okay. Hopefully we can get to all these, but we talked about lunch meetings. One of the questions was the future of the big studio. Where do you think that the big studio is going as this thing is happening, as this transition is taking place to this crazy mixed up graphics world?
I guess it depends on which studios you're talking about. But I think in the next, and I'm probably not being aggressive enough, let's just say in the next 5 years, half of them I think will be gone.
And this will be because of contractors, or because people who are doing their own little like post houses, or what would be the main reason for that?
I think it's probably a combination of everything, but I think we forget the economics of a large studio.
Oh yeah.
The large studios were built because they provided something no one else had, which that doesn't exist, right? You know, everybody can do this stuff. They also existed because they had creatives that they chose to push as hard as possible the personalities and the voice and vision. Studios don't do that anymore, very rarely. I mean, Elastic did a great job of it with Patrick Clare, but at the same time, you could do that as a large studio, older studio, because the capability for that person to leave and start their own thing was really difficult, right? So that's that flip between same thing we saw in music and same thing we saw in comic books. It took our industry a little bit longer, but 5 people with fully kitted out GPU render stations and Redshift and a good IT infrastructure, along with a biz dev person and a kind of operations manager. If you have a lead creative that goes out and can win jobs, you're in.
Yeah.
Like you have a company, right? J.R. Kness just did that, right? Like Ordinary Folk is a perfect example of that on that kind of After Effects side. I would say the biggest thing though is the economics. Imagine you have a company and let's say it costs you $200,000 to run it with 3 people, and then 5 years later, all those people are there and you hire 10 more people. Those people who are there for 5 years want raises or deserve a cut of the jobs they win. So all of a sudden, to be competitive, you have to hire 10 more people and go after twice as many jobs. It's this, if you had signed a lease for your office and you bought hardware, 8 to 10 years into that whole relationship, your building's either going to cost more or they're going to want to kick you out, or the building's getting sold and you have to go and find a new lease. And then all of a sudden what you were working at is way more expensive. The hardware you relied on diminishes really quickly on the back end. So like that Mac Pro you talked about, they lasted a long time, but when you have to replace them, you have to replace them all at once to stay competitive,
right,
in this world. So all of a sudden your cost of entry is way more expensive. Those people that were there, to keep them, they want raises, they want more, they want health insurance, which increases cost. And there's probably 1 or 2 creatives that are demanding, a higher percentage of the cut of the company's profit, or they're going to leave and start their own company. So I think the natural lifespan actually in our industry, on the motion design world, is that every 5 to 8 years, several of the companies, people break off and start their own thing, and that's a natural healthy flow. For some reason, you've seen a lot of these places stay with the same people for a long time. This last round, like Imaginary Forces, that used to be a place where every 3 or 4 years, a new company or two would kind of start off, kind of splinter off and start their own thing.
Right.
But you haven't seen that much of it there. So I feel like you have to look at these studios, and there's probably it's almost like a pressure valve being able to let some people go or have people leave because it kind of resets. But for whatever reason, maybe because of the cost of insurance or the difficulties in starting larger companies, I think they've been carrying this overhead for a long time.
And I touched on it I think it was last week, but the fact that the video industry seems to follow the audio industry when it comes to these things. You see these same things happen over and over.
Exactly. So I think for that reason, I think the other thing too is some of these larger, older companies, I think a company like Buck, man, you don't even see a fraction of the work they actually do. And they're so big that it's almost difficult for them to fail because work shows up and knocks on the door and it's stuff you never even, you never see, they never put on the website. I think Ryan Hunting even mentioned at Blend a year or 2 ago, whenever it was, that I think it was 10 or 15% of the work is all that you ever see on their site or with their name attached to it. So there's some companies that I think are probably okay, or they're fine. That's why I said half. But man, the other thing is some of these companies are approaching 20, 25 years that they've been open. Those owners at some point, man, it's a rat race sometimes. I wouldn't be surprised if they just want to get out. And if you want to sell, they're not they're the most profitable companies because, I mean, we've had this discussion. I've had this discussion a lot. In a world where the hardware does, when you used to have 5 Flame machines and a really well integrated IT system with, client supervised suites for editorial and for finishing, that was a real asset you could sell. You could go to another person that wanted to have these capabilities, whether it was a film studio or an agency, and be like, hey, I'm going to sell my design agency or my motion design shop. And when these companies also had agency of record kind of contracts where it's oh, you know what, Pure Leaf Tea, we're going to make the next 2 years worth of your commercials and your branding, your strategy, that was also an asset you could sell. You could actually sell that to another person, and all that stuff comes up and goes with them, and you have value. You have real value. I would argue that for most of these places, the infrastructure is really old and aging. The old studios don't have anywhere near about the flexibility that if you started a company today to just go and buy a couple of cheap PCs, that expense, they still have to let their hardware and software amortize to be able to make their business make sense long run. The only real value that a lot of these places really have are the previous relationships, right? So if you did have a previous relationship, the legacy of the work you've done, like a Digital Kitchen, we have an incredible legacy of the title sequences. Then, without trying to, We turned into like a proto experiential company when we did the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas or the LAX International Terminal, and we get knocks on the door with RFPs for those two kinds of work all the time. That has some value, like the name and the ability to say you did this.
And that's the evolution. That's part of the evolution we were talking about too, of keeping up with the technology and not being left behind when that stuff changes.
Mm-hmm. But the thing I'm really getting to about all of it is that, to me, the really only real asset besides those two things, which I think are partial, are the people. The people that you employ at a company, like Imaginary Forces, DK, You & Co, Royale, Blind, Onfeld, like the big companies, the names that everybody, when you ask them where they would want to work at, it's really the people. We're not like Pixar where they have hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D and proprietary software and RenderMan that they own. Like most of us don't have our own software or processes or technology. It's really just the people and the work we've made. So I feel like a lot of those companies, like at some point, for all those different reasons, I feel like a third to a half of them in the next 5 years probably will be gone or will be in very different circumstances, because it's really hard for companies like those to pivot to say like, oh, you know what, now we're going to do AR, because the artists they're probably not, if you've been someplace for 10 years, you're not interested in learning all this stuff to be able to do real time. And the amount of money it would cost to actually bring in a team of 10 people who do real time programming, those people would rather just start their own company because they're not restricted by large management or whatever else it might be. I have no idea if this is interesting at all, but
sure it is. Some of it actually, it seems to me like the pivot's going to be easier when the software gets easier. For one, I think if somebody presented me with a piece of, and that's why a lot of this is popular. That's why Octane is popular. Octane is popular because it's easy to use. So you're not thinking about for the most part, you still have to know a lot about it, but you can just kind of like dive right into it and concentrate on your story. If something came along that allowed me to do AR without doing a lot of learning, then I would be all over it.
And that's coming.
It is coming. And again, what is it going to do? It's going to cause all the people who are in AR right now, that because they know how to do it, it's going to cause them to be like, oh my gosh, that's all ruined now because of this easy to use. So it's the same thing. It's cyclical, right?
But I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like that's why less conversations, but higher quality conversations and networking and your output of work. If you know that that's coming right now and it's something that even remotely interests you, that's why you take some of that time that you'd spend on Facebook or Twitter or venting or whatever it is, and start talking to some people who are in AR that don't necessarily have the same motion design or storytelling or design skills. And if you're picking something to partner with someone like that can use you as much as you can use them. And even if it's just a one-off project, in another year or two, when someone's like, oh man, we got to start doing, whatever it is, real time, you have that experience, you have that relationship, you have those connections. That's why I say, like, networking is not just like the spammy, like, talk to 100 different people on LinkedIn every week to build up the number of people you have. It's the quality of the network. It's the quality of the relationship.
I feel like these studios also that are going under, I feel like back in the day, maybe they would have been purchased.
Yes.
Because they had such value. And now it's more about the people. So those people kind of go away and start their own thing, like you said, and then nobody really wants to buy that. And some people are content with that too. If you're a group of, or, if you're doing your own collective or whatever it is, you might really like what you're doing. And that's kind of all you want to do, is get paid and have a comfortable life doing what you want to do. It may not be possible even to take a small place like that and turn it into like a multi-million-dollar corporation without getting into something else or getting into AR, being a pioneer in another area. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. If that's what you want to do, if it's all about your art and you're making a living, that's totally fine.
Yeah. I saw Pedro make a mention of something about that's why Houdini artists are hard to make because it's difficult to. I'm assuming I think it says master in there, but
yeah,
that's true. But it's also becoming rapidly much easier to learn Houdini. Like find somebody who actually knew Houdini 5 years ago, and ask them, like, what was that experience like versus now? Like that was that tool was very much a someone who was technically capable and art driven, that there was a high requirement to understand. It had a very different mentality than I think what it has now, and the accessibility. And then just like we saw, so I used to work in 3D Studio Max, right? And it was so funny because I was there right when while I was learning. It was right when more and more people started doing training, and then there were tons of more plugins and more people selling like pre-built stuff, you know, what model packs with textures or whatever. And then like 7-8 years later, I just started getting into Cinema 4D, and that was right when Nick and Grayscale Gorilla started kind of putting stuff out, and then more tools started coming out, and then Cineversity really started pushing, and there was this kind of like critical mass, right, where there was the right amount of people, the right amount of training, and just the right amount of easy to access tools that led into much more difficult things. Houdini is like right on that cusp right now, right? Like I feel like I mean, the Entagma guys are amazing. There's 2 or 3 people on YouTube that are really good, but I feel like we're just like a half a step away from either there being a person who's the Andrew Kramer / Nick Campbell of Houdini, or one of these places basically crafts that personality. Like if GSG all of a sudden hires, you know, the right person who's just doing some training on YouTube right now and pushes them into the Grayscale Gorilla spotlight, Houdini all of a sudden becomes much, not that it's not easy, but it's accessible. I think that's a big difference, is that Houdini has become accessible in the same way that cinema made themselves accessible.
Oh, I had a little error in my recording. Am I echoing by any chance right now?
You sound good to me.
Okay. Just making sure I'm not echoing. I gotta resync real fast here.
Yeah, no worries.
And lots of ghosts in the machine today. Check. All right, let's do another sync. Ready?
All right, 1 second. All right.
1, 2, 3.
Awesome.
What Glenn Dyer says in the chat is, yeah, but food is cheap enough and readily available to cook. Oh, I am echoing, they're saying.
Oh, I think I hear it now, yeah.
Yeah, okay, hold on. I know what the problem is. Give me 1 second.
I'm going to grab a drink real quick. All right, I'm back.
All right. Am I echoing now? I should be good now.
I don't hear anything.
Okay. All right. All right. Check. All right, let's do another sync. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Awesome.
So what Glenn says in the chat is, yeah, but food is cheap enough and readily available to cook, but only a few can be master chefs, which I always see Master Chief when I see that.
Only few of us Master Chief. That's
so
true.
It's true, but there's still people that need microwave burritos.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about Chad Ashley, or I'm sorry, not Chad Ashley, about Ash Thorpe. I was mixed up. You don't need to be an Ash Thorpe, and the industry doesn't need you to be an Ash Thorpe for you to be able to have a solid career that gives you satisfaction, that provides for your family, and creates security and a place for you to kind of have your journey. I think that there's a lot more availability for that kind of career than there was 5 to 10 years ago.
I've got 2 more notes from you here. I think the open office hours. What is that?
Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier. That's the Calendly event where like you can basically do 15:30 in an hour.
Okay, that's what that was. Okay.
Yeah.
And mograph mastermind, you have that on the list too.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier too. That's that whole idea that it's kind of in a beta test right now, but it's the I'm kind of the reason I put open in office hours is that I don't hold any like proprietary like system at all. I just like trying to get more people to do it. But both of those things are just initiatives that I've started that I hope more people. I can only reach so many people, right? Like even if I did 4 people a day, that times however many days in the week there are, I can only talk to 4 people. But if I talk to 1 person a week, but I got 10 other people to do that, to open up their lunch hour or their weekend to talk to people, we'd have way healthier and way better dialogue. And more situations like this where people can ask questions. But I wish that there were more people that were 20 years down the road that I could talk to you, right? Like I wish Peter Frankfurt at Imaginary Forces had open office hours for other people who were wanting to start a studio, you know, and could like reach out and be like, oh, you know, Peter, I need 15 minutes of your time because I started my company, but I don't know how to find legal counsel. Or I have a creative director who wants a percentage of every job that he or she wins. How do I handle that? And I know they've dealt with that before, right? And then same thing with the mograph mastermind. It's basically an organized way for people to work on personal projects and create support and like a sounding board and criticism together. And that's, again, like I own no proprietary knowledge of this. Like I'm just doing it. Austin Saylor started his Full Harbor kind of almost at the exact same time that I was doing my beta test. I think Kaylee Akins from Motion Hatch has a similar thing to mine. We're not stepping on each other's toes. I'm not charging anything, so it's like I don't really care. It's just more for me, like I feel like there's a certain responsibility we all have in the industry as we get older to give back and to take what we've learned and not hold on to it, but let people know about it and open up the industry. It's not like I'm not making money from it, but I'm gaining tons back from talking to people every week and doing, like, I have a personal project I'm working on with everyone, so it's super helpful. So yeah, those are the two big ideas for me for right now.
Well, I want to open it up for questions a little bit. So if you're in the chat, put in your questions. We're going to move on and come back to that once we got a couple questions. And move to some Ravcock, what's your flavor? And we're going to talk about some render engines for a minute here. And I don't really have much, but I did want to talk about Octane, because Octane for Cinema 4D 4.02.1 R3 is now out. That's not hard to remember. But I mentioned earlier working with David and Phil, and there were some interesting things that I've learned this week about, we were working on some color variations, on instance variations and stuff. And so that was really interesting to really dive into there and work with instance nodes. And, you know, it might hopefully at some point become a tutorial. We'll see. And I've really been doing a lot more with vertex weights this week as well, because it's really cool now with vertex weights and fields in Cinema 4D, what you can do and how powerful it is, and have it drive something, have some sort of field that actually creates a wipe across an object in the vertex map, which then drives, you know, a mixed material within Octane or something. Again, another good tutorial, you know. These are all great little snippets. My personal thing, I'm trying to right now figure out if I wanted to do an entire course, what would it be on? You know, because I wanted to do one on Espresso, and then I start looking at it and the imposter syndrome kicks in. You know, I know a decent amount about Espresso, but I don't know what that one node does, you know. So I'm thinking, do I want to do that? Do I want to do Octane? Do I want to do some sort of intro series? My question for you is there any reason not to do a tutorial if you're the type of person who creates tutorials or classes or whatever it is there any reason not to do something that someone has done before? Because the way that I like to look at it is, if there's a certain person that I like to learn from, I would rather learn it from them than anyone else. And if I knew that they didn't do a series because someone else already had, I think I might be upset about that. Do you think it's a waste of time?
No, not at all. And I think the perfect example is the Redshift training that came out from Rich Noseworthy at through Hello Lux, and then the Grayscale Gorilla. Same exact tools, right? And even at the intro, a little bit of similar like duplicity in terms of what they're talking about, because they're breaking stuff down. But the moment they go into the way they work in the projects they work on, I would say if you have any kind of mindset, to share your knowledge in any way, I think it's worth doing. Because expressly for what you said, right? Like there are so many audiences and so many people learn in so many different ways. Some people love to have the comprehensive, this is everything, and they want to have that in the back of their head, and they want to be able to refer to it again later, right? Some people can't learn that way at all. They don't read the instruction manual. They learn by doing. They learn by playing. And there's nothing better for those people than to see someone have a problem and how they approach it. And even if they fail in it as they're going on, the way I love the idea of someone like you actually doing a tutorial where it's not slick and it's not produced, and it literally is me aspirationally seeing someone else at the same level as me or slightly higher in their knowledge of something messing up and failing. Like every time I've ever taught a class, the classes where I talk about failure always are the ones that have the most resonance. Always are the ones that people 7, 8 years later come back. I remember David Aryu came up to me because I did an FX PhD class that I didn't even finish. I did 8 of the 10 classes, and I had to hand it off to the team at FX PhD to finish because I was so busy at work at IF. And I remember him coming up to me and just telling me, like, like there was a specific class, I think it was the one where I talked about failure, that it helped a lot. Like just being able to see people mess up and how they work with failure or mistakes or assuming something's going to work. Like I love the idea of watching someone work live and seeing how they solve a problem. And honestly, I think that could be very much like your character, the thing that separates you from, someone else who already knows it, that's super polished. They've recorded 3 times, cut it down, edit it, and make. It's like what we talk about with Instagram, right? Like nobody Instagrams the shitty parts of their lives. No one does. So we all see these we see these reflections of just like your best life that has everything kind of cut out and edited. And it makes me laugh every time I hear brands or clients tell me like, like we really love the authentic kind of like YouTube lifestyle, like bloggers or whatever. I'm like, that's bullshit, man. That is as fake as a Hollywood movie is. Like I remember hearing as a kid, people talking about like, oh man, how does that movie star look that way? Or how are they perfect? Or how's that athlete, like whatever. It's like you're only seeing like the limited amount of stuff that people want to see. And Instagram is exactly the same thing like a Hollywood movie. It's just like it has a different filter and a different kind of like film quality to it. But I think personally, I would love to see the way you would approach a class. And I would strongly encourage anybody, like if you figured something out or you like working on something and you want to share it with people, like there's no reason to not do that. And again, like in terms of like building a network or building a reputation or whatever you want to call it, I think that's one of the best things you can do is share with people. Like people love seeing how someone else works and they love being able to ask them. And then they also, like for you, they'd love to be able to help you. Like if you were the kind of person who's like, guys, I'm only 5 steps ahead of you. I'm going to show you how I work, but tell me if you know something better. You guys are already communicating so much. Like that's so different than a lot of the other people doing them.
That's something that I really appreciate when I'm doing some of my like late night streams. I'll just get on and just working on something in Octane, and someone like Billy will just hop in and be like, oh, if you click this button right here, this would be a lot easier, that kind of a thing. I really like that. And I hope I pronounced this right. Vladimir says, and he says, sorry for my bad English, but essentially I think what he's saying, it's kind of what we touched on earlier, but does a 3D artist need to be constantly pushing and marketing for self-promotion, or is the hard work going to just speak for itself in the end? And I think Ri-Fi Illusion Fields, he actually mentioned, it's kind of a little bit of both. If you're doing too much self-promotion, what's the point if you're not working?
Yeah, I think it just comes back down to intent and really honest goal setting, right? Like, why are you worried about self-promotion? And I'm assuming self-promotion is in like what we had, the dialogue we had like an hour ago.
Yeah.
Chasing Instagram and doing all the social media and all that stuff. Like, if your goal is to get work, I would say most of the stuff I see people doing on self-promotion, at least in the 3D world, maybe a little less in the design and kind of like, in the design world, good work begets more good work, right? A constant stream of mediocre work, if it's showing you learning, can create a voice in your head and can also create like a personality for people to root for, right? Like I've hired plenty of people that were not automatically identifiable as the best person for the job, right?
Right.
But if they were someone that I've watched them grow over 6 months on Instagram and they reached out to me on LinkedIn, and then I had a 15-minute dialogue with them once, and then 2 months later, 3 months later, they send me their reel, and I've seen the leap in quality, and I've seen the desire to get better. Like I would say more than 50% of when I hire somebody, it's because I'm hiring them for the person, not for the work, if that makes sense. Like someone who's excited, someone who wants to grow, someone who wants to collaborate, someone who doesn't necessarily have ego, but they have confidence, or they have like a questioning kind of mentality. We're like, why did you do that? How can I do that? That's so much better than just finding the best person for the job, but might be kind of an asshole or have a little bit of an ego or isn't easy to work with. So I mean, I guess it goes back to like, what are you worried that you're not getting out of your self-promotion efforts now? If it's a job, focus on making really good work and explain to people how you did it. And then talk to as many people that have the positions that you want available to you. And
along the lines of people watching you work and things like that, I like Lucas's comment in the chat, which is that's why he loves watching Chris Schmidt work, because he'll just hop on the live stream, and he was doing those things where he would just figure out how to do something. Someone would say, how do you do this? And you're on the spot and you're just trying to figure out how to solve someone's problem, and it's fun. It's like a puzzle as well.
It's fun just as a viewer, right? Like, so it's fun as a viewer, but then if I didn't know who Chris Schmidt was and I was watching him work, I would immediately want to have him around in my office, because the curiosity, like I said, good work begets good work. Curiosity creates more curiosity in the rest of the team, whether it's remote freelance or it's people who live stream or it's people in the same room, right? Like that curious kind of tinkering, adventurous spirit, and not somebody who's like, don't look at my computer, and they turn their thing around, or they go into a room and they just come up with a perfectly made object. Like that doesn't help anyone in a work environment, right? So I mean, like what Chris demonstrates from it, and I think someone mentioned Arthur Whitehead, like that ability to share, that ability to explain what you're doing or ask for help, like those are all things that get considered when you're trying to hire somebody.
Yeah. Well, we'll open it for some more questions if they come up here, but I did want to switch gears a little bit and go to some links, which I only have 2 links, and I think the other ones I had we already talked about. But let's see. The first one is... Andy Needham sent me the X Particles Challenge 2018 show reel. So he's put together a show reel of the winners, which is really good. And then, of course, we talked about Doom Patrol, but the new title sequence for Doom Patrol is up. That was all done in Octane. What render engine did you use? But that's why it's so good. It of course, it looks great, and it was done really well in Octane, but it's also about what's being shown in this. And how much time they spent to really make it have a certain feel and the story it's telling.
Yeah. I can give you a good example too of like the stuff we were talking about that ties directly into what we were talking about. And I apologize because I can't remember if it was Octane or Redshift, but Aaron Coverett did his still life piece. And I've known Aaron, I've seen his work before. I've always thought it was solid. But holy shit, if I didn't think that this was from somebody who was 10 years old or they've been working for a much longer time, if that didn't level up my understanding of who he was as an artist and what he was capable and what he wanted to do, I immediately, like no joke, was like, hey, if you ever are looking for freelance, let me know. And we had been talking for a while, and just this last 3 weeks, he's been working on a small part of a very large project for me. And man, like his process, the other people who worked alongside him, like there were 3 people remote working on it. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't work with each other. But that guy blew out everyone else's work in that part of the project, and his level of thought and his process was mind blowing. Yeah. And what he did in that one piece and his behind the scenes, he does that. That was a 1-to-1 what he did for me, like on a job. And I'm hoping his one gets picked, because then I'll have 3 to 4 months of working with him, directly on the actual like realization of it. But, oh man, like that. And again, like it doesn't even matter to me if it's Octane or Redshift. Like I can't even remember. I just remember the work.
Right. Exactly.
That that to everybody who's watching, that is such a great example. Look at what Aaron did. I guarantee he wasn't necessarily posting dailies, right? That guy probably spent several weeks, if not a month, on that one project. But it was just a perfectly timed kind of, if you want to think of your career as like self-promotion or marketing or whatever, he put the piece out. I think he had a couple teasers like on Instagram of it. And I was like, wow, what is that? Is it a painting? Is it a photo? Is it a rendering? Is it going to animate? He put the thing out, and then several days later, he put the behind the scenes out. And I think in terms of his ability to get hired, the behind the scenes was infinitely more powerful, actually, than the work itself. But Aaron, Aaron is amazing, but like look at his previous work and then look at the growth from just one job to the next. And man, if I get him on this job and his idea gets picked, hopefully what we'll be able to do even going forward will be an even bigger leap. But that just shows how one good piece of work, for whoever asked that earlier about, should I be worrying about self-promotion and posting every day, or like one good piece of work in our industry has the capability to catch the attention and change your career arc instantly.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we're at the 2-hour mark, so I want to try and get to our 2 last segments. This will be a little bit of a change in gears, but I wanted to do Beeple's People with you.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So Take out your Beeple viewer of choice, and mine is Twitter. And I'm just going to bring these up. You'll be able to see them on your feed too. Once,
Perfect.
if you. And so we're going to go to, let's see, February 19, Year of Our Lord 2019. And this one is called San Francisco 2183. I've got to find it. Here we go. And let me just bring that up here on the old stream.
Oh, wow.
So you can see. This is really cool. There's this. I feel like there's a transition going on right now in what Beeple's doing, because he's putting out more of those like artistic, cartoonish line drawn things, and he's kind of mixing them in throughout some of the stuff he's doing. I really feel like this is technically the same thing that he has been doing with some of his older stuff, but the look is different. It has a different feel to it, maybe more of a, it's not a toonish look, closer to a painted look. Maybe along the lines of like what Aaron did with his still life. You know, this is something that feels a little bit different. I'm also wondering if the only thing that does kind of affect things for me a little bit as far as like choosing an engine is sometimes you can get the look you want by going with a different engine. So I don't know if this is a different engine or not, but sometimes I do feel like, oh, well, you kind of want this style. It's going to be easier to achieve in this engine. You know, maybe that's an important, maybe workflow wise, but San Francisco 2183. So I'm going to have to add that to my crazy timeline with the yard and things going everywhere to figure out what's going on with some of these. But I like the thought that it's something's happened and it's brought San Francisco a little bit back in time here, like everything else in Beeple's dystopian future.
I love it. No, I think it's cool. I mean, obviously the art stuff, right? Like there's definitely a lot of design fundamental stuff to talk about, but just storyline wise, if you wouldn't have told me the name, I wouldn't have had as many opinions. But the fact that it's like the water level's risen, the lights are on, but there's no one there. The fact that like the atmospheric perspective kind of makes it feel like the environment of San Francisco changed dramatically. The fact that like SF is already overbuilt, but then the fact that it's kind of built on top of itself and it's branching, all that stuff's crazy. There's still life, right? There's birds, so there's no humans. So was there some kind of virus, or did robots attack, but they only attacked humans? They rebel against their overlords, but like are those flying birds robots? And those are the things that killed everybody. And now they're just running over their world. Art-wise, I've always loved Beeple's stuff. Like, there's a reason why people want posters and T-shirts and stuff. Like, I said it the last time I was on, but like his stuff, it's a joy to watch his stuff go and build, because, like you said, sometimes it'll be he finds a new piece of technology and then it's him playing with it, but it always is through like this perspective of the he likes. You literally across like if this was just pushed up, 20% more, and there's a little bit more white space at the top. This is the name of a book, right? Like this is a book cover just across the top. It's the back cover. And I always feel like his stuff is the perfect like 80s sci-fi novel covers. They're just like, they imply so much story. And like the fact that San Francisco, is in the name, like his stuff is so awesome that if you just put the name of a book on top of it, it would change the story. There's so much openness to it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like what Pedro's saying, like it's illustrating the real estate madness, but the real estate madness after, the polar ice caps melted and people died, and there's nothing else there. Like there's so much stuff. In terms of the art, though, like I feel like, you do something every day for 10 years. And you have people seeing it, and you have people commenting on it, and you have people wanting to buy it, or people making, kind of constructive criticism. You're gonna get better as an artist, hopefully, doing that much work. But yeah, like you look at it and people are saying it looks like concept art, it looks like oil painting. I think there's a lot of stuff that I was just talking to someone in my mograph mentor class last week, right? They were starting to make a opening shot for their demo reel, and it looked beautiful, but it looked CG for some reason. We couldn't really figure out why before the class. Looking at it, the thing is, like, you have ultimate control over your imagery, right? But I think because Octane and Redshift both make something look fairly photoreal, and you can make beautiful things pretty much, laying stuff out if you have good kind of conceptual organization, like your layouts, are balanced. You make something look beautiful instantly, but people are like, well, it doesn't look like concept art. It doesn't look like something that's different from the look. But I think it's because people aren't really necessarily applying like design principles. Like if you look at that, the value contrast in it is amazing, right? Like in the front, bottom, third, there are darker things, but nothing's black, right? Like nothing's black. It's pure. It's all lifted blacks. And as you go along, you feel that atmospheric perspective kind of fade out. And you do technically get some of that from like volume fog, but it feels way more controlled. And he may or may not have done it. It may have just been like his experience of where he starts and ends the volume fog, or the environment kind of like falling off. So you tend to lose contrast as you go back, right? The highest level blacks start to deepen. Depending on where the world is, if this is closer to an ocean or farther away from an ocean, it has a tendency to go towards cooler tones. So as you go back, you lose the kind of warmer tones. So the fact that those lights are starting to like go out, or you see less of them, that's something you have to control, right? Like that's not something that you just automatically get by default from a render engine. Even though it's photorealistically real, you make a choice. Like, will it fall off to cool tones? Will it fall off to warmer tones? Does the contrast? Am I artistically deciding to make sure that the values are losing contrast as they go back? The fact that those birds aren't like black, they're tinted to the color that the environment's going to. Those are decisions someone who's designing a logo or illustrating an oil painting, like those are all the decisions you have to make. It's not just, can you make something look photoreal? It's like, what is your voice? What are you adding? What's your style? Just the fact that he picked that kind of greenish, that specific greenish blue and the orange, like those are split complementary values. They have a certain kind of feeling, like there's a sickly feeling, because he didn't go more red to green, he made more orange to blue, which if you just put your hand on the color wheel and you start to tie it, like they still have a pop and they still have a strength, but then that green kind of gives you almost like a sickly tone, or there's something wrong here, but if you went more towards the kind of yellow and blue, it might have a totally different emotional feeling, right? He may just picking that because he thinks those look cool, but they're cool because he's done so many of these and he's developed in his own head what cool is to him. You can analytically kind of make decisions, or you can kind of just over the time as you develop your voice also make those decisions. So yeah, his stuff's awesome, man. I love seeing it. There's so much. If he heard us talking about this, he'd probably be like, that's a lot of bullshit. I just made something cool and I hit render. But you can't argue the fact that I guarantee he's also looking at other references and other things for his own enjoyment, for his own study. And then over time of forcing yourself to look at other things, and building up what you like and what you don't like, that sits in the back of your head. That's kind of part of that like brain dump of artistic things and things you just noticed. That Jake Parker has this great idea about you have to have a creative bank account. Like you have to constantly be looking at other things and reading other things and absorbing the real world and other people's manufactured world and music and poetry and science and fashion, just to find the things that speak to you. And they just need to sit there and kind of slowly meld together. Because when you actually have to make something, you have to have something to pull from. Otherwise, if you don't, you just go and see what the next last thing is that somebody else did and you copy it, right? Like you just be like, oh, this is cool. And we see it in our world all the time, right? Like True Detective comes out and everybody wants double, like reverse images and double negative, like all that exposure. And you can still use those things, but you have to do two things. You either have to find a way to make that technique work for the subject matter, or you have to combine it with 2 or 3 other things to make it new. And hopefully they have a reason why those 2 or 3 other things are being put together. That's awesome, man. I love this stuff. I love looking at his stuff where you actually slow down and you look at it. It's not just like, yep, that's cool, I can't do it, wish I could, and then move on to the next one.
February 20th, Origin Line. Bring this one up here. This is, I like that it's called Origin Line because it makes me think that, I don't even know how to put it in words. It makes me feel like, obviously, Origin Line, like this is the beginning of something or the center of something. This is a marker for something. And where is this line coming from, and why is it there? Because the surrounding portions are your basic people industrial thing, but then there's this center focus, and why is it there? Right.
Oh man, and just I think he does such a great job of naming his shit. Like it automatically makes you change. So I mean, we can go back to some stuff we were just talking about, right? Like he could have made this that kind of greenish blue and orange, but he shifted the color wheel, right? And I feel like that instead of it being green, being more blue, it feels way cooler. It feels way like cold, not like physically cold, but like emotionally cold. The fact that I think it's hard to tell in the stream, but I feel like is there a dude on the left, like on a scaffolding there, like just
yeah, there's a like people's people right there.
Yeah, there's a people. But the fact that like look at the lights, right? There's no orange light. There's nothing like to it. It's cold. It's almost like mechanical. The fact that there's like, from what I can see, there's only one person makes it automatically be like, okay, I think he works with scale in 3D. Like illustrators do this all the time, right? And like concept developers do it. But like as a dude who's just making beautiful imagery, he always does a great job like setting scale, whether it's a little person in a large area or something big looking at something small. But I feel like, man, like he's just gotten, he gets better and better. It's frustrating that he's that good. But like the name automatically makes me feel like maybe this is a world where there's no humans, right? And this guy is the creator of it, or he designed it, and this reddish orange light is the light that's going to populate it with people, and he's literally watching his like cold, empty creation get ready to be filled with a bunch of people. Like this orange light's going to just scale out or radiate out or push. It's going to run over surfaces, and someone's going to be there. They're just going to be teleported there or put in there.
And that's what's so great, is that title is what really makes this story right here.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I hate to just go back to like work all the time, but that it shows the power of like, you can be really good at the technical stuff, right? Like you can be really, really good at it. But if you don't have the other side of the creative brain where you're writing or you're thinking or you're concepting or you're just even just like shooting the shit with friends about what could something be, like that, I think we just learned this, right? Like that image is great. But as soon as let's say this, that image is very beautiful and it's good, but the moment you put a title on it that ties to something else, it becomes great. It becomes something special. It becomes art. Just by having that and forcing you, like every time I look at his stuff, I always find myself doing this. I just get closer and closer and closer to the screen. Like what, there's something else there. Like it's great. I think it's awesome.
Well, this next one is pretty funny because this was, the day that he was at the Motion Plus Design conference. There was a picture or a photo that Jules Urbach posted on Twitter, and it was him taking a photo of Andrew Kramer, who was taking a photo of Beeple, who was taking a photo of I don't know what.
That's awesome.
But he posted that, and I guess they were hanging out in the green room as he says here. But this one that he did here. Let me reset the size here so you can see the whole thing. The name of this one is February 23rd. It's called Andrew Kramer Poop Factory.
That's awesome.
So I love how he will take something he's doing that day and apply it to this. And I have no idea how Andrew Kramer's poop factors into this whole Beeple story, but
That's awesome. But I mean, that's the whole joy of doing like if you're really going to do it daily, right? Like it's, in some ways it's like a journal or a diary to like be able to go back and like, oh, this is, I would never have noticed or thought that this had anything to do with Kramer, but with the name on there, like I'm sure there was a joke somewhere during the day that they were like, he was probably doing something where it's like, oh man, I got to get another one of these done. I don't know if he has like a buffer. In my mind, he's crazy enough that I imagine he doesn't have one. He just wakes up in the morning. He's like, by the end of the day, I have to get one done.
That's what he's told us.
That's mind blowing. I would believe it for someone who's done it for that long. But like, imagine you knew you had to travel to go to a conference and you had to do some kind of presentation, but still had to get one of these done. Like,
oh yeah.
Excuse me. There's something just cool about the fact that these are just almost, like I said, almost like a diary. Like, I mean, as an art piece, it's awesome, right? But like, look at the difference in the last 3 images in terms of just his color palettes and the way he uses color. Like, again, he'd probably call bullshit on all this, but then again, like value contrast, right? Like again, there's nothing that goes to black except for the highest point of contrast is the place that you want people to look, right? And even though there's all that cool detail at the bottom, I would even say shape contrast, texture contrast, and value contrast. Like that double ring of neon is the brightest thing on the screen, and then the darkest thing is the metal right behind it. He didn't have to do that, right? He didn't have to make that metal dark black. And again, Beeple could very much just be like an amazing guitar player who can't read music, who doesn't write music, has to have somebody else transcribe stuff.
He just knows when it sounds good.
Emotionally, yeah. And he does it all the time. But that shows why you would want to do one-a-days, right? You'd want to do one-a-days because you can knock stuff out like this in a short amount of time, not because you're looking for followers or all the other stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful image, man. Like, it's super cool. And again, you know, this could be the cover of like Akira's eighth issue, right? Like, where they're rebuilding the world and they doubled down on nuclear energy, and then the next one after this is the same thing, but with everything blown up and the towers are gone.
Right. And see, you notice here, because this is obviously, so there's instancing going on with these big towers. This little round tank thingy, we've seen this in a bunch of his stuff. We've seen the cranes in the buildings, so you know, like, he's on site. In fact, in that picture we were looking at, I think he was doing his daily. Probably. So you can imagine a scenario where he kind of put this part in here first in the foreground, and Andrew Kramer walked in and said, "What is that? A bunch of poop?" You know, yeah. And so he's like, "Oh, I'll name it that." You know, that to me is probably more likely of a scenario, knowing him. But you know what I'm saying. But again, it still ends up being something really cool.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if while they're watching it, Andrew had some, because sometimes when you watch an artist do their work, it's like magic, right? Like there's a couple artists I know that, like, they literally just walk up to a wall. I don't know them. I've seen them work where they walk up to a wall and it's white, and they can just go with a marker, and from one point, basically, it's almost like they're sculpting away a drawing that was already there, and that looks like magic. Right. Looks like magic. There's other people, when you actually watch them do it, you're like, it was that easy? Like, it was that, like, you just did it that, like, you just dropped in like some kit bash stuff, put in a light, threw in an HDRI, and then added some grain and did a couple other things, and like, it's that easy? Like, it could have easily been like Andrew Kramer watching him do it, and it took him 15 minutes, and the render took an hour. He's like, "Oh, you're a poop factory, man. You just shit stuff out, you drop it down, yeah. Look how good it looks," right? It could have been a one-off comment, them drinking, and it's like, oh man, like, there's the name. Like, sometimes you watch people who are just like, that's impossible. There's no way I could ever aspire to do that. That's magic. And there's other people where it's like, you did it that quick? Was that easy? How is it that easy to be able to do that? I could do that if I spent 10 years making these every single day. Right. The hard part isn't doing it. The hard part is having the discipline to do it every day.
We got one last question I want to go to here from Phil, aka Raid Zero, who says, "What do you do when you're not working? Do you have something that you do that relaxes you other than art?"
This is a tough one, man. I know there's a whole world where everybody talks about like work-life balance, and I'm not one of these like aggro like video game developer kind of douchebag where it's like life is work or whatever, work is life. But I'm very fortunate because I went to school to be a chemical engineer, like very like science, very like driven about like success and security. And halfway through college, I kind of discovered how much I really like making art, or working in art, or working with artists, or whatever. And I made a big shift. Like, you can imagine, like, switching halfway through school from like an engineering background to an art background, like how disastrous that can be for like friends and family to try to understand. But when I made that decision, I made it mostly because I realized my whole life that I love doing this stuff. I love talking about it. I love obsessing about it. I love being around it. So in some ways, I can't tell you a good answer other than like, I love writing. I love drawing. I love being around other people doing art. That's why, you know, the office hours and the mastermind is so important to me. I love teaching. That stuff is relaxing to me. Like, I'm working on a comic book right now, right? Like, I'm not the best hand-drawn kind of artist, but I feel like I finally got to the point where, like, the stories I want to tell, I'm kind of capable of doing. And it's taken, like, when I was in high school, I used to make comic books, like literally like go to Kinko's, photocopy them and sell them at like local stores, right? Yeah. And I love doing that. And that was, like, I remember being like a junior in high school and spending almost my entire summer like drawing in my room, you know, like just cranking away at it and being like, wow, I can tell stories. This is awesome. And they're garbage, right? Like, they're really bad, but but like that ambition at that like age, like, I can't believe I didn't figure out sooner that I should have like been doing this. But I've just recently been revisiting that, and I think between spending more time kind of teaching people, helping other people make stuff, that to me is really relaxing. I mean, I love watching movies. I love hanging out with my wife. Is a really great. She knows when I'm pushing too hard. She knows where I'm even like, well, what I do is what I love, and what I love is what I do. But like, she pulls me out of it a lot when I need to. But to be honest, like with the way my job is now, where I'm not on the box as much as I used to be because I'm a creative director, and like I'm obviously like I'm traveling a lot and pitching and doing stuff.
Hovering, right?
The call to make stuff is like that. I love sitting down and making stuff. So Yeah, I don't really have a lot of like I don't brew my own craft beer. I'm not a foodie.
Yeah.
I don't really travel a lot if it's not for work. I try to, but like I don't do a lot of that for fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I like making art.
Cool. All right. Well, wanted to get to Brograph recommends real quick before we go. These don't have to be like super detailed because I know some of these we could probably sit here and talk about them for like an hour. And I know you got to get going probably. I've got a call coming up, so we'll run through these real quick and get your favorites. And number one is going to be your all-time favorite movie.
Iron Giant.
All right, good one. That's a good one. And music.
Man, I know people aren't gonna like this, but up until the last two albums, Kanye West, Bruce Springsteen, and Oasis.
All right, and is that the same? I always like to bring this up. Is it the same thing you like to listen to while you work as opposed to when you're in the car, or is it different?
I listen to everything. I feel like it's a pretty broad range. I just started listening to more movie soundtracks because I have to do a lot more writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you already in your brain, you already know what like the emotion is for a movie, so it's easy to kind of conjure that up while you're writing by listening to a soundtrack. So yeah, I don't really do a lot of like stuff. I need to do more of it, but yeah, movie soundtracks is something I've kind of recently started doing more of.
I feel like I've been doing a lot of writing recently, writing up documents and things for our new ventures and stuff like that. And I feel like if I'm listening to a song with lyrics or if I'm listening to a podcast, I can't think in my head. It has to be something instrumental, or I can't hear my own self think or talk. Also, favorite TV show.
There was a show in the 80s called Amazing Stories that was started by Steven Spielberg. It was like an anthology show, kind of like Twilight Zone. And Apple is actually bringing it back. That's probably my favorite.
Oh, nice. What about your favorite podcast?
There's a really great show called the Hollywood Screenwriters Rant Room, and it's a bunch of people who are trying to like sell their scripts and TV show scripts and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of analogs to screenwriting, to like kind of pitching for motion graphics, and I've been listening to a lot of stuff like that. And then there's a show called the Comics Lab that's just two guys who make web comics. It's been really fun to listen to.
Do you ever listen to that comic show that oh gosh, what is his name now? It's been a long time since it's Andy Ihnatko. Do you listen to his comic book stuff?
I used to listen to MacBreak Weekly and all the like the This Week in Mac or This Week in Apple, like that whole Leo Laporte thing was like what got me into stuff. And I've actually run into Andy a couple times on the street in Chicago.
Oh really? That's right.
He's so identifiable. I've only said hello once because it seemed like he was in a rush, and I think I startled him a little bit, so I don't have to bother him. But I love it. He's the guy who turned me on to there's a font company called Comicraft, and at the end of every year, like when it goes from 2018 to 2019, they sell all their fonts for the price of that year, so $20.19.
Oh, nice.
And I think like every year I buy like 4 or 5 kind of comic-y kind of like just fonts. But he's great. I think he's amazing.
He works, I think, still for the Chicago Sun-Times, or he did.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, plug-in. What's your favorite plug-in?
Oh, I should have thought better about this one. Right now, I'm really into Stardust for After Effects.
Yeah.
Super cool. It really breaks your brain. But I also, they just released K-Bar 2 for After Effects, which it just basically, the coolest thing is it gives you the ability to put as many little kind of panels. Like if you use Cinema, you can make your own custom panels. After Effects doesn't let you do it, but K-Bar does. And it lets you just, I have so many scripts that it's really hard to remember that you have all of them, but being able to visually see them in your interface is a great reminder. Like, oh, there is a tool from like 12 years ago that's perfect for this one situation.
And I think I know the answer to this, but headphones?
Headphones, yeah, iPods, or AirPods. I use them all the time.
And website, okay, well, we changed this a little bit. Website or Chrome extension, but I'd also like to put app into there as well. Website or an app or something like that you use on a regular basis.
Just recently, I started using Trello and Mind Map and Scrivener for a lot of writing. So that like Hydra, like the 3-headed Scrivener for writing and just kind of getting note cards down, Trello to organize all of it, and then Mind Map. I wish they had a Windows version, but being able to go from my phone to my iPad, back and forth and map stuff. It's awesome.
Scrivener is the best. I write everything in there because it's just so easy. If you're writing a series, a tutorial series, educational, any talk that I do on motion graphics, like NAB or something like that, I start with Scrivener and I note card it all out, and then I dumb it down until it's just bullet points in the end. But I write it first.
Dude, the note cards, I love it, and then it's one of the few things, because I have to be on a Mac at work a lot. I love my iPad. I don't have an Apple computer, laptop, or desktop, but the fact that it does Windows, iOS, and Mac OS, and it kind of syncs between all of them. But there's kind of shockingly few like kind of productivity apps that do that.
Yeah, I need a Scrivener for PC because
Is it on
PC?
It's on PC. Yeah, and you can sync between them all.
Maybe I was thinking of OmniFocus. That's only Mac.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, well that's good to know because I'm trying to transition all this other stuff over. And yesterday I was like, oh well, what can I get that's like Scrivener? And there we go.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
No, that's awesome.
And lastly, favorite life hack.
I don't know if this is more of a technical one. Yeah, this is more a technical one than a life hack. Well, basic life hack, if you can find a way to switch as much of your carbohydrate eating to protein, you don't have to do anything else and you can lose 20 pounds.
Oh, I know that.
That's like shocked. I did this last year. I did no more working out. I did nothing different other than I stopped drinking soda, which might have been the big thing. But I also tracked, I basically was like, okay, if I would have normally had some shitty bag of chips, I'll do this and it has protein in it. Awesome, lost 20 pounds. And then the other one, it's a technical one, like a program. But there's this really cool program for anybody who's switching over to Windows called Brevy. Super cheap, but it basically is you can add keyboard shortcuts that either launch like programs or you can add bits of text. So like when you're typing, you can basically say like semicolon CD, and then it puts like just if you find yourself writing the same things over and over, or you need shortcuts, it's like shortcuts but for type.
It's like text expander.
It's exactly a text expander, but it's on the Windows side. And I use it, like I have to do so many like reaching out to freelancers or talking to clients. And if I have to write something more than twice, even if it's like a paragraph, I never write it more than twice now. I just put it in there and just call it up.
Oh, that's what I do for all the show notes for this episode and everything. I have, if I have a link on the clipboard, I hit this double button and it puts it in HTML, or it does a markdown thing or whatever it is. So yeah, those kind of things are really cool. And if it's anything like text expander, it keeps track of how much time you've saved over time.
So, I don't know if it does that, but that would be amazing. I'd love to be able to have that.
Text expander is like you saved one day of typing in your entire life because
it's like keeping track of how many steps you make, but just with your fingers, not your feet.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Well, that wraps it up. We're going to get out of here. We really appreciate you being on. I know Matt's going to listen or could be listening now. Who knows?
Well, hopefully everything's going okay for him.
Yeah. And this was apparently everybody says they really enjoyed the episode. So good job.
Thanks for all the time. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'd rather we get it, going right and get the good audio tracks and stuff, and I'll sweeten it all after the fact and do what I can with that. We're gonna get out of here though. You can rate us on iTunes, leave a review. You can also subscribe to us on your podcatcher of choice. Helps get our ratings up. You can say you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt with the no Brograph, no mograph tee, which soon will be limited edition. I'm just telling you now. And limited edition Gaten D. Simone shirt, the Render Things shirt. We're going to keep that one around. Shirt and hoodie. The Paul Babb Feel the Babb 2020 shirt. All the profits from that go to Doctors Without Borders. And I think that's about it. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and of course Brograph.com. And we're going to say goodbye. Thanks everybody for watching. And until next time, I'm Dave. I'm
Ryan.
Have a good one. Later, bros. All right, we're still live. Right. I'm going to play a little music thingy.
Nice. I stopped recording. Awesome, man. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Let me turn off the live stream real fast, and then we can chat for a second here.
Sounds good.